The government hits back at the Archbishop of Canterbury after he branded the immigration bill morally unacceptable.
A very good morning to you. Welcome to the programme at 6 o'clock on Thursday, the 11th of May. This is Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn and Isabel.
Thank you very much for your company. Leading our news this morning, the Immigration Minister has entered into a row with the Archbishop of Canterbury. He says his criticisms of the illegal migration bill fail to offer any alternative solutions. In a rare political intervention, Justin Welby said the legislation would hurt Britain's global standing.
UK interest rates are predicted to rise to their highest level since 2008 today in what would be the Bank of England's 12th consecutive rise. Inflation in the UK currently stands stubbornly at 10.1%.
Some breaking news overnight. Adam Price has quit Plaid Cymru after damning report found misogyny, bullying and harassment within the party.
Also today.
Just so you understand, ready? I never met this woman. I never saw this woman.
Donald Trump has made his first public appearance since a jury found him to have sexually abused the writer E. Jean Carroll. During the fiery back and forth, he also said he'd accept the results of the next election only if he thought it was fair.
There we go, look at that. There's the lineup throughout your week here in GB News, nominated for a Trick Award. GB News Breakfast is up for multi-channel news programme and it is a public vote.
Yes,
Therefore...
and Eamonn's also been nominated for Best News Presenter. And we've created a QR code to make it extra helpful for you when you are casting your vote. Just use that on the screen there.
So that little dotty bit...
lead you straight to the website.
You scan that on your phone and then it brings you to the website and you can vote directly from that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. So there's Stephen and Ellie and Isabel and myself there, and it would be very nice to have your vote. Not that we're begging, but we are. We are. Right, a right political hoo-ha this morning. Ministers clashing with the Archbishop of Canterbury after he attacked the government's illegal migration bill as being morally unacceptable. Morality is his business. He's justified to talk about that.
Well, Justin Welby, who said the legislation had too many problems for one speech, warned that it would damage the UK's standing in the world. Let's speak now to Daily Express political reporter Millie Cook. I mean, he didn't hold back, did he, yesterday? And yet the government have come out and said, actually, what's so moral about not stopping people smugglers?
No, he absolutely didn't hold back. We saw some pretty searing criticism from the Archbishop yesterday. And he wasn't alone in the Lords either. There was some criticism from across the benches. While his criticism has been dismissed by senior Tories, so by the Prime Minister's spokesperson and also Robert Jenrick, it is likely to be ruffling some feathers in the Tory party, because obviously look at the public position that the Archbishop holds. Just look at his role, the role he played in the in King Charles III's coronation. He's not exactly a low-key figure, so I feel like it will be making some Tories pretty nervous at the moment.
And how much do you think the defence that he hasn't come up with an alternative solution will wash? I mean, that's not really his job. His job is to speak out if he feels he has some sort of moral imperative to do so. It's not to come up with government policy.
I think at the moment there's kind of concern that the Lords who are unelected are pushing around the government on policies. But obviously he feels it's his moral duty to speak up. So it's not also, he's not a policymaker. They're kind of just there to scrutinise. So I think he's just trying to push the government to do what he believes is right, which is partly, to be fair, currently in the Lords, his job. Yeah,
it is his job, and being leader of the Church of England is his job as well. He's part of the legislature, being in the House of Lords as well. So these things tie neatly together, but politicians hate being lectured, and they are scared stiff. They're frightened of morality and religion. They really don't like this. But really, has the Archbishop done anything that is
unconstitutional?
Yeah, or not within his remit.
I mean, he is in the House of Lords for a reason. There's a second house for a reason. But equally, one of the dismissals from Deputy Party Chairman Lee Anderson is that the Archbishop is kind of ignoring the will of the people. And he said that about multiple peers in the House of Lords, that he's essentially arguing that...
Well, is it the will of the people or is it the will of the government?
I think the government likes to believe they're the same thing, but I think they have been under pressure. I've heard from a lot of MPs who feel that their constituents are putting pressure on them to kind of stop the boats and to stop channel crossings to the UK. So I do feel like there is a sentiment among Tory MPs and MPs in general that people want the UK's borders to be more tightly controlled, but equally that doesn't necessarily speak for the whole country, and there is an argument to be made that we should be hearing from a wide range of views.
Well, Lord Dannatt provided an alternative view. Of course, his position having been boss of the armed forces, he said it risks trashing the UK's reputation, and the viciousness of this bill offends many people's moral position. And he also shared the Archbishop's view that it was short-termist, that this was a global, long-term issue, that barges and Wandon schemes
what a problem it is.
out.
What a problem it is. But then you try telling that to people who can't get a place for their children at their local school, that their medical facilities, their hospitals, their first aid units are being run down. People and other communities being set up on the verge of their existing community, you know, like camps of 500 men somewhere in a village of 2,500 people. And no one's saying this is easy. This is not easy. And it's whether the Archbishop is right or wrong. It is morally questionable, but practically, what else is to be done? And as Jenrick said yesterday, he hasn't come up with another solution.
Yeah, and of course the government always has to think about the taxpayer in all of this as well, and the huge amount of money that is being spent on all of that, and they have to balance that with, of course, also the mandate that they have to try and get control of it.
I think there is a real sentiment among a lot of people across the UK that everyone's so stretched at the moment that there is kind of this fear about giving too much away to people who aren't in the UK because people are concerned about their own livelihoods. But equally, there's this major fear that the UK is kind of shirking its international responsibility to look after asylum seekers and to kind of stand with the international community in caring for refugees.
OK, well, look, you listening, you watching, what do you think about this intervention by the Archbishop of Canterbury? Whether you're religious or not, do you think that he has a moral duty, a right to spiritually guide or lead the government and the rest of us? Let us know, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or do you think he should just keep his nose out of it?
Well, do you know, I thought it was interesting language that was used by Lord Frost yesterday. Of course, he was the architect of Brexit largely, and he came out and said he resented the idea that it was immoral, and he actually said that arguably hundreds of thousands, maybe millions, could have valid asylum claims, and we simply can't take them all. So as Eamonn says, let us know your views on all of that this morning.
OK. Thank you. The Bank of England is predicted to raise interest rates for the 12th time in a row today to their highest level since 2008.
This is as it continues to battle inflationary pressures, and experts believe the base rate will rise by 0.25% to 4.5%.
Well, in the studio now, we can speak to financial market analyst Fiona Cincotta. Fiona, there's good news and there's bad news. Very much prediction that there will be a rise, a small rise, but a lot of people saying this will be the last one you'll have to deal with.
Well, we'd hope so. But we have inflation of over 10% here in the UK at the moment, which is extremely high, and it is the Bank of England's job to try and bring that down. And their way to try and bring that down is by raising interest rates. So whilst we're expecting an interest rate hike from them today, I think they're probably likely to want to leave the door open for a potential hike in June, just because to talk about sort of pausing interest rate hikes when inflation is still in double digits does seem a little bit sort of offbeat. If we compare our inflation levels to inflation in the Eurozone, where it's cooled to 7%, or inflation in the US, where it's cooled to 4.9%, there's a big difference going on there. We know that the Federal Reserve has said that they're going to consider, or they've hinted that they might consider pausing interest rate hikes in June, but their inflation level is half of what ours is. So yes, although we're going to see a rate hike today, I think we'll probably see a door left open for further hikes. But there is some good news. I think we're going to see perhaps that the UK economy is actually holding up much better than we were expecting. So if we think back to the beginning of the year, there was a lot of doom and gloom about sort of deep recessions and how's the UK economy going to survive. But as it turns out, it does appear to be holding up much better, which is good news for the state of the economy, but it also means that consumers are spending, which is keeping inflation relatively elevated.
We were hearing yesterday that the pound is rallying, doing better than expected in the wake of the mini budget last year compared to the dollar, and that they've revised those forecasts in relation to that. So that was a bit of good news. But I was reading this morning that if interest rates do get raised later in the year to as high as 5%, which is obviously possible, that could see house prices going down by 15%, which of course also has an impact on everybody's feeling of wealth and the cost of living crisis.
Yes, completely. So that's what's being priced in by the markets at the moment, is that interest rates will rise to 5% later in the year, and that will have a detrimental effect on the housing market. So, I mean, demand is going to be falling. People just aren't going to be interested or looking to purchase houses, with interest rates so high. And even those remortgaging are going to be having a difficult time, struggling time to do that. But I think that's half of what the whole idea of raising interest rates is to get households to rein in spending in order to bring that inflation level down.
How is America affecting us, Fiona, and what may happen there, and the fact that their debt ceiling is under question? How could that impact on us?
OK, well, there's that saying, if the US sneezes, the rest of the world catches a cold, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's still this impasse, and it's an unprecedented situation of the US defaulting on its debt. So the broad expectation is still that they're going to reach a deal before the deadline, which we're looking at about the beginning of June. If that wasn't achieved, there have been warnings from the US Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen that the consequences really could be catastrophic. And so, we could expect to see, depending how long it goes on for, but there could be, millions of job losses, a deep recession in the US. The stock markets could see quite a lot of their value wiped off, and that would naturally affect the UK, Europe, and other parts of the global economy.
Oh, good. Something to look forward to. Fiona Cotter, thank you very much, financial market analyst from City Index. Thank you.
The time, 12 minutes past 6 o'clock. Let's bring you up to date with what else is happening on the news front.
Overnight, Adam Price has announced he will quit as leader of Plaid Cymru. The decision comes just days after a review found that the Welsh Nationalist political party has a culture of harassment, bullying and misogyny.
Government plans to remove thousands of EU laws from the UK statute book by the end of the year have now been altered. Business Secretary Kemi Badenoch says potentially only 800 will now be revoked under the retained EU law bill instead of the proposed 4,000.
Canada has unveiled its new passport design, which features references to the newly crowned king. The passport will display a coat of arms, making Canada among the first in the Commonwealth to introduce a travel document that references the monarch. I thought we were going to do an ad-lib chat then about the rise of vests. Do you own what are described as old man vests in your cupboard at all? Oh, well, shame, because fashionistas say making a comeback.
It's making a comeback. I mean, it was natural attire for my dad. But,
what, under a shirt or just walking around the house?
No, under a shirt.
Well, this is, this is to walk around in without anything on top, maybe with your shirt unbuttoned.
Well, I mean, it's not unusual. I mean, there are very famous people who wear these sort of things. It's catching on the showbiz world. But, I would take my lead from the magnificent Rab C. Nesbitt. There you see Bruce Willis wearing one there, and some young actor there, whatever it is. Yeah. But the man, the doyen of how to wear a vest is Rab. Look at him there.
No one's talking about the net vest, surely.
But the string vest, what is the difference? How does string hold heat?
Oh, because it has little holes in it which retains pockets of air, and that helps you get warm. It's the same concept with the blanket. There's little blankets with.
Could you imagine rubbing your hand on a man's chest, a shirt,
14 minutes past 6,
and feeling a string vest underneath?
No. I've never even seen one.
Have you not?
No. Let alone touched one. Thank God.
But anyway,
are you a fan of what's being dubbed by fashionistas as the old man vest? I suppose if you live long enough, all fashions come full circle, don't they?
No, but this is about, isn't it, wearing underwear as outerwear.
Yeah.
And women do that a lot. Women
Yes.
would wear their undergarments. I don't know how to describe it, but a lot of
I'm
them,
leaving you to do this
a lot
bit.
of them wear their undergarments as outergarments.
Sure, yeah, they could just wear a slip or something as a dress, maybe.
Yes.
Anyway, where do you stand on it? Let us know. That's our little talking point this morning. But back to serious news. Again, overnight, Donald Trump has taken part in a CNN, what they call town hall event, really a sort of Q&A, making his first comments since he was found to have sexually abused the magazine writer Eamonn Carroll. Here's what he had to say.
Manhattan jury found that you sexually abused the writer Eamonn Carroll and defamed her. You've denied this, but what do you say to voters who say it disqualifies you from being president?
Well, there aren't too many of them because my poll numbers just came out. They went up. Okay.
Do you think that will deter women from voting for you?
No, I don't think so, because I think the whole thing, just so you understand, ready? I never met this woman. I never saw this woman.
You are running in the 2024 race. If you are the Republican nominee and you are in that 2024 race, will you commit tonight to accepting the results of the 2024 election?
Yeah, if I think it's an honest election, absolutely, I would.
Will you commit to accepting the results of the election regardless of the outcome?
You want me to answer it again? If I think it's an honest election, I would be honored to. They raided my house. They didn't raid the house of Joe Biden. They didn't raid Obama.
But Joe Biden didn't ignore a subpoena to get those documents back like
Joe
you
Biden
did. And
took
so that's the question.
1,850 boxes.
But that's the question that investigators have, I think, is why you held on to those documents when you knew the federal government was seeking them and then had given you a subpoena to return them.
Are you ready? Are you ready? Can I talk?
Yeah, what's
you
the
mind?
answer?
Do you mind?
I would like for you to answer the question.
Okay, it's very simple to answer.
That's why I asked it.
It's very simple to. You're a nasty person, I'll tell you.
You're a nasty person. I'm not saying
Everyone laughing as well.
It was funny.
Very base. It's very base. Let's bring
very
in
direct.
Dr. Christopher Phelps, who teaches American history at Nottingham University. Good morning to you. Look, I never like to see professionals being sort of criticised in that way. She's simply doing her job.
I find it funny. And most people would laugh.
You're not there to go to a comedy show. You're there to listen to
You're
debate.
there to win the argument, win the debate, and that's one of the ways he's winning it.
I just don't understand why good manners has gone out the window. But
Yeah,
anyway.
correct. Now, Doctor, what did you think of that? He hasn't laughed yet. He hasn't smiled yet. Well, we'll see.
Well, I apologize for not wearing my net vest this morning. Being a host of a 1-hour forum with Donald Trump is a great challenge. And I think there's a stream of statements that come from him that may ring true to him and may excite his base. And that hall in New Hampshire, which is a deep Republican state and was full of his fans who had crowded in. It was not a representative general electorate audience. The challenge for a host, though, is that those very statements that that may have elicited the right response from the audience from Trump's point of view were often false. For example, what you just played, where he said, "I never met that woman." There's a photograph of her and her then husband with him at an event. So we know he met her. There's photographic evidence of it. And furthermore, immediately following the sexual assault, which a jury has now found to have occurred, she talked to two of her friends who both testified in the case and said that, she told them about this. So,
all right. Well, look, tell me this, though. Why does he even need to do an interview like this? Because he's the ex-president. Everybody knows who Donald Trump is. It's not as if he needs the profile. And, when he declares and when he starts running, fine. But until we get to that point, why is he having to do little chats and meetings like this?
Well, this is the first salvo of the election, really. He hasn't been in a mainstream media format like that since 2020. He's been in the, conservative media bubble and on his own social media platform. But it gives him an audience. It gives him an audience beyond his normal reach. And it gives a buzz, just like we're doing right here. All of the media this morning is focusing on this event. So it's essentially a kind of big infomercial from his point of view. The problem is that his messaging, I think he missed a moment, to be honest, because he didn't take the opportunity to challenge Joe Biden very much. He didn't take the opportunity to present the case against the president who's running for re-election. He instead tried to reproduce his claims about the last election, which he claims was a rigged election, a fraud, and so forth. But more than 60 courts have found there to be no evidence of that. And the American public doesn't believe it. Most people believe that Joe Biden was legitimately elected president of the United States. So, and then he had to discuss this sexual assault case. So on both of these points, actually, it's toxic for the centrist women sort of mothers, the classic swing voter who might not want taxes raised and be fiscally conservative, but socially moderate, and also wants a kind of calm democracy. And that reminds them of the Capitol riots, which he defended last night. It reminds them of the chaos of the election claims and all of the divisiveness in the society. Okay. And so I'm not sure, even though he got a tremendous amount of attention out of this, that it was the kind of attention he needs to win the general election.
And would he, Professor, just shortly and sweetly, do you think if he was to run, he would win?
I think right now he's slated to win the Republican nomination, and last night probably helped with that. Ron DeSantis, his main opponent, doesn't want to go on CNN because he sees it as liberal mainstream media. But Donald Trump just took the opportunity then to kind of outfox DeSantis on that front and get all the attention for himself. And then in the general election, though, it's a bit of a toss-up right now. Biden's poll numbers are not good. Inflation in the U.S. may look moderate from the British point of view, but it's high from the American point of view. Americans think the economy is going in the wrong direction. Biden seems old and is being tagged as old. If Biden can run against crazy, though, and say, you know, it's a choice between me and crazy, then Biden may be able to pull it out. So it's really going to be a close election, I think.
Thank you. Sleepy versus crazy. Thank you very much indeed, Professor. Really appreciate your take on things. Thank you. All the best. Bye-bye.
Right, with the time at 6:22, stay with us. Coming up, a mother will be speaking out about her missing son on his birthday. He disappeared in Portugal. We'll have his story next.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back, 6:25 still to come on today's programme.
At 6:45, we are going to the biggest agricultural event in Northern
look at
Ireland.
those piggy wigs.
They are. But let me tell you about a piggy wig at the Balmoral show where I was a reporter, one of my first reporting jobs. I used to be an agriculture correspondent and I had to go to the Balmoral show, which is an amazing, lovely, if you have a show, an agricultural show in your part of the world, you'll realise how nice it was. Anyway, so I got inside, so they say, go and film inside with the pigs in a pen like that.
Oh no, that's dangerous.
Well, it is dangerous. Because a pig is basically the length of the desk that we're sitting at here. It's the size of a torpedo.
The length of a desk?
It is.
You and your fisherman's tail.
A pig is the longest, fattest thing. Do you know Prince Charles's fingers? You know why they're fat? Do you know the way? They look like...
Sausage fingers.
Sausage fingers. They look like pig fingers, right? So a pig is... Do you know what a torpedo looks like?
Yes.
Well, a pig is like the length.
I have seen a pig before.
Have you seen
Believe
a torpedo?
it or not. Yes.
Well, anyway, so that was fine. So I'm standing with the pigs snottering all around me, whatever. And what does it do? It bites my leg.
Yeah, I'm not surprised.
It bit
Did
my
it take
leg.
a chunk out?
It made a hole in my trousers. There's a hole in my trousers, dear Liza.
I got pooped on at the Royal Wells show.
By what?
A cow during a live on the television. All down the back of my silk blouse.
Oh, that's...
It's on an archive somewhere.
I had a
BBC.
lamb pooped all over me. But it had the runs.
This is why live television and agricultural shows are absolutely brilliant. So stay tuned for that. I think that's at 6:45, we were saying. We're going to be live there a little bit later on in the programme as well.
And what I love, they do lovely equestrian events. What was it this weekend? Was it badminton?
Badminton was over the bank holiday, yeah.
Yeah, it was I tell you,
trials.
That's a hard thing for those horses and riders to do. But I do love all things country like that.
Me
quite
too.
like to have been a country squire.
Me too.
Not doing any hard work, but, sort of...
Yeah, being the landowner.
Supervising the driving around in a Land Rover.
Oh, absolutely.
With a cap.
Oh, stop.
Saying to people...
Music to my ears.
Oh, Johnny, come here. Come here and fix this
We've got
gate.
a lot of landowners and country folk who watch GB News. Everyone in the green tweeds. They love it. Big shout out to the green tweeds this morning. Anyway, 7:20. After Britain's first ever 3-parent baby was born this week using a groundbreaking IVF procedure, we'll be asking whether the ability to edit babies is a scientific leap forward or actually a step too far. Keep your views coming in. We love to hear from you. gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Unless you believe, like Donald Trump, you are not a nice person. You're not. Well, when you like, I'd love him to say that to me.
What would you say?
I'm not a nice person. Well, you would start.
At least I'm not a sexual predator.
How did he get that woman in the lingerie booth? What were they in a lingerie
You never
booth
met her,
for?
Eamonn.
Oh, he never met her. That's right, despite the pictures, he never met her. Very good point. Run the sting.
Now, of course, children's birthdays, big reason for celebration, but today, for one mother, her son's 14th birthday won't be one that she'll be celebrating with him.
Now, from Doncaster, Rebecca Jones is making a fresh appeal for her teenager, Jaden Pearson, to come home. 8 months ago, he never returned from a holiday to Portugal with his dad.
She claims Jaden's been kidnapped by his father, and Anna Riley went to meet her.
Instead of cutting cake for her son on his 14th birthday, Jaden's mum Rebecca is lighting a candle for her missing teenager to keep hope alive of seeing him again. It's been 8 months since Rebecca last had contact with Jaden after he vanished on a trip to Portugal with his father Andrew. The pair stayed in the country after a family holiday and Rebecca returned home to Doncaster with Jaden's younger brother. But when Jayden and Andrew failed to arrive in the UK as planned in September, Rebecca reported them missing to police and returned to Portugal to search for her son. Jayden was since spotted at a farm in the Alcobaça area of Portugal with his dad in February, but since then the trail has gone cold.
He's had no family or friends out there for 8 months, no schooling, and Year 10 is so important. His GCSEs are coming up and I want him to really do them. I just want him to be part of my family again and be my baby. I wake up every day thinking, will I ever see him again? Will I ever get to talk to him properly? Will I ever get to cuddle him? Tell him how much I love him.
Rebecca still has unopened Christmas presents for Jayden and now has cards and gifts that she won't be able to give him on his birthday.
I don't want to celebrate it without him here, but I will, because I will never forget him. He's quite a popular lad and he deserves the best. I just want to be part of his life. I want him to come home and celebrate his birthday, and I've already missed Christmas and his birthday, and I don't want to miss any more.
Sadly, Rebecca's situation isn't unique. Hundreds of parents abduct their children each year, according to UK charity Reunite International.
Here at Reunite, we log between 500 and 600 new cases each year, and those circumstances vary greatly from situations like Rebecca's, where it's children not coming back from holiday, as well as children who are moved off to another country without any prior warning whatsoever, really. So unfortunately, it is probably more common than we are all aware of, really.
Portuguese authorities and South Yorkshire Police are assisting in this missing persons case. The force here said, "We understand how distressing this is for the family and have been in frequent contact with them. We continue to support the investigation and work with the relevant authorities to help with their inquiries." For now, Rebecca's only wish is to be reunited with her son. Anna Riley, GB News, Doncaster.
And maybe you can help in that story. I mean, the last sighting was in Portugal in February, and if you know of Jayden's whereabouts, and because obviously a programme like ours goes out worldwide, it's available online, and maybe someone has seen that report and maybe it's jogged your memory about Jayden somewhere.
Stay with us. We're going to discuss the Archbishop of Canterbury's comments on illegal migration with Freddie Gray and Scarlett Maguire after this.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, The People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it. Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Here we are on a Thursday morning. I think it'd be a good idea to run through the front pages of the newspapers, give you a reflection of how they see the world today.
The Mail, leading with the Archbishop of Canterbury's criticism over the government's handling of illegal migration. They say, what is so moral about not stopping people smugglers?
Telegraph focuses on the government's failure to scrap 4,000 EU laws by the end of the year. They reckon, well, if they're lucky, they reckon they'll get 800 of them scrapped.
The Mirror says 400,000 people in the UK need specialist care for long COVID.
And The Star, we were talking about this earlier, white vests. Our newspaper reviewer, Freddie Gray, has got a string one under his shirt.
Do you own
an
old man vest?
I'm not going to reveal it.
Oh.
Come on.
No.
Oh.
No, you don't want to see it.
No. I tell you, rub his chest, rub the front of his shirt, see what's there. Freddie is the deputy editor of The Spectator, and former Labour advisor Scarlett Maguire is here as well. Lovely to see you both.
I'm desperately wanting to see Freddie's string vest, because
yeah.
I always look at him and think, this man really knows about fashion.
Yeah. But you know,
I'm not actually wearing a string vest. I don't want this to count.
Let's not objectify poor Freddie.
Yeah. I was saying earlier to Isabel, I mean, it was standard attire for my father. A string vest, and I always just wondered, there's all these holes in it, so what on earth use is it? What is it doing?
It captures the air. It's a layer of warm air. Yes, that's what vests
But can I just point out, the fashionistas are not calling for the return of the holy one. They're talking about these, you know, just your standard dad's vest. Actually, my son has one.
Yeah, what can I say? This is so typical you. Where's the funniness in that? Where?
Well,
at least,
you know, it's not the story. So
I didn't let the facts get in the way of a story there. But you will now have to bring it all down to blandness and ordinariness. But OK, that's fine.
Just the facts. Freddie, Archbishop of Canterbury, he's facing a backlash. Is that fair or unfair?
We love it. We love it. Everybody gets their knickers in a twist as soon as somebody from a religious background says something. No, as soon as somebody from a Christian religious background says something.
Well, the Daily Mail certainly has its knickers in a twist. What's so moral about not stopping people smugglers is the splash. You know, everybody likes to get wound up about this issue. The Archbishop of Canterbury has made this intervention. He's probably going to quit soon, so he's not going quietly. And Tory MPs, I think understandably, are saying this is a morally complicated issue. There are two sides to this equation. It's not a simple case of, you know, Jesus would have let the migrants in. Jesus would have done, but then there are other factors here. That there's people smuggling gangs, which several MPs are pointing out here. Is it moral to allow a people smuggling industry to thrive? There's the question.
Well, can I just pick up on that? Because I don't think the Archbishop of Canterbury was suggesting in any way he should allow it to thrive. He should open up more safe and legal routes, would be his argument, in which case the people smugglers wouldn't have any kind of criminal, you know, business plan.
I mean, actually, it's exactly what he was saying. He was saying this bill doesn't take into account dealing with the people smugglers. That was one of the reasons he found the bill immoral. Was it didn't deal with the thing. What it did was it punished the people in the small boats, and there's a question about whether it would have any effect on the people smugglers.
What do you think about the fact that he spoke out at all? I mean, he is in the higher house, in the House of Lords. That's what he's elected to the House of Lords for opinions. Should he keep them to himself?
No, I mean, I mean, I'm sure that I would probably disagree with him on all sorts of things, but actually, I think that if he felt that as the leader of the Church of England, that he feels that it's immoral, then of course he has to speak out. And actually, he did speak out right from the beginning. It's just that he's never, I mean, to my knowledge, he's never made a speech in the House of Lords before. We all knew he was going to do it, so we watched it. And, you know, he'd clearly thought it through.
Well, I'm not sure how far he did think it through. I mean, there were some complete cobblers in there. He said that there'll be 800 million refugees as a result of climate change by 2050. I think even the most apocalyptic scenarios don't say anything like that. But, you know, this is another example of sort of public figures can quite often make very scientifically illiterate claims, and nobody criticises them, nobody challenges them on it. I think it is good that the Archbishop of Canterbury makes interventions on what are obviously morally difficult subjects. I think that's important. I think spiritual leaders should do that. But I don't think it's true that it was perfectly, you know, fact-checked and he's absolutely on solid ground. I think it's a debatable subject.
But I think it is important. I mean, what he said was, we've got to deal with this in a proper way because this isn't going to stop. I mean, that because of climate change, we're going to have to get... I mean, you know, how many refugees are there from Sudan? OK? I mean, what we do know is that most African countries have got hundreds of thousands, if not 1 million refugees. I mean, I was in Jordan. They have 1 million Syrian refugees in Jordan. This is a really poor country.
1 million.
A million. They took in 1 million. Yes. I mean, you know, Germany took in 1 million Ukrainians before we'd taken in 1. I mean, actually, we don't take very many refugees.
Scarlett, how do they house those refugees in Sudan? Are these tented villages?
In Jordan, they're tented villages.
Yeah.
And also, I mean, I did meet some who were just in a flat. I mean, a mother and a granddaughter. Grandmother and her granddaughter, which was really, really depressing because all the grandmother wanted to do was to go back to Syria. And when we said, is there anything we can do? She said, stop the war. This was years ago. I mean, that's what's so depressing. And then the granddaughter wasn't even getting to school because the school, her brothers thought that she shouldn't go because it was dangerous. It is so depressing.
Do you happen to know how Jordan pays for these refugees? I mean, is this oil wealth that's paying for this? Or
no, Jordan doesn't have oil. No, the people who will be paying for the refugees will be the UN agencies.
OK, right.
Any more on that? Freddie?
Well, I think, you know, the government, the moral criticism of the government, I think, stands is that for a long time, under successive prime ministers, they've played headlines with this issue. You know, they wanted to be seen to be clamping down on it because they know that's what voters want, or a lot of voters want. But they've not actually done anything, and they've been in power for so long now, and it is a very difficult issue to solve, there's no doubt about that. Is Rishi Sunak going to push it as hard as he apparently seems to want to push it? That's the big question.
Let's talk about medical matters again. Desperate the government are now to suddenly, at the last minute, fill the amount of doctor vacancies there are throughout the NHS, not by creating more doctors, but by drafting people around from various places. We heard yesterday of an apprenticeship you could have. You could go straight into a hospital as an 18-year-old and 6-7 years later be a doctor without doing a degree. Today's plan, front page of the Times, Scarlett, NHS plans to send more doctors into GP surgeries. How are they going to do that?
So there's a special category of doctors that aren't going to become consultants.
Yeah.
Most of those, surprisingly enough, were trained abroad. And they're going to take these doctors who are based, most of whom work for agencies and sort of dot around and put them into GP surgeries. And what my worry is that actually GPs, I mean, I know it's really difficult with so few of them seeing people face to face, but actually they're there to spot things that you don't necessarily know that you have, and whether these people will be saying, oh yes, okay, so you know you've got a really bad pain in your tummy, so we'll send you to A&E. But it really worries me that a GP who's been around for a long time, who knows what's going on, is much, much better than somebody who's going to come in for 6 months. Because also these people leave the NHS 5 times as often as other doctors.
Yeah.
So I think it sounds like a good idea. But, I mean, and the other thing is poor old GPs are dealing with the mental health crisis. And so what do these people do? Do they just give them, you know, pills? I mean, it doesn't seem... It's one of those quick fixes that
presumably
might not work.
a second tier of GP would be preferable to a pharmacist.
Well, I think if you put the pharmacist and the GP, the second tier, together, what you get is a denigration of the standard that you have to be a GP. So it's the usual thing without private private business, there's no value in a job. No matter what you do, they want to take away the speciality of the job. They wanted to make it look as if anybody could do that. And I think this is another example. What's the big deal about being a GP? They're saying,
but are there not some conditions or ailments where you could say, I don't necessarily need to see a really experienced GP, my son's got a verruca or something.
Roulette, isn't it? I mean,
I just need the junior one, or I could just go to the pharmacist.
But
I think you've got to give the patient a certain amount of credit. We're not idiots. We know what kind of level of illness we've got.
It may work when you're dealing with appendicitis, but it may not work if you're dealing with spotting cancer. That's the thing with it.
Actually, it's exactly what happened to me. Is that I thought wrongly, in fact, that I had a urinary tract infection, and I said I don't have to go and see the GP. I just need some antibiotics. And the GP rang me back and said, yeah, okay, we'll test that. And she said, is there anything else? Well, I mean, 4 weeks later, I was diagnosed with precancerous bowel cancer, right? Because she said, I'm a bit worried about you, go in and see. And actually, it was because it was a good GP. Before, we're in a stage where we're now, where GPs are just having to get through their workload. I mean, that's what's so terrible.
Train more of them and pay them what they're worth, really, is what it should be down to. But there we go, doctors on the cheap, really.
Right, let's talk about interest rates. Freddie, front of the eye this morning, £7,000 mortgage hike after record interest rate rises is their headline.
Yes, it's a staggering figure that the eye's got there, because I didn't realise it was that high. That is an enormous chunk. That's the average. And if you think the average annual salary is around £30,000, that's a significant added burden to everybody during a cost of living crisis. And I think this is for people on variable interest rate mortgages. A lot of people I know, me included, are on fixed rate, but they're going to end soon. And as soon as they end, everybody's facing a difficult decision. So a lot of the pain of high interest rates is being delayed, but it's in the post. And what this report shows is that it's going to be more brutal than a lot of people think. And if we can't get inflation under control and you have high interest rates, that's a recipe for real economic disaster.
Yeah, people not being able to pay their... Well, we had that last month, didn't we?
Mass defaults.
70,000 people, I think, also not being able to pay their rent or their mortgages. And I think house prices expected to drop as well, so it's all...
Well, house prices are going to drop because people are going to have to sell up, aren't they? I mean, that's what happens if you can't pay your mortgage. I mean, it's terrifying.
One of the solutions could be to go camping, Scarlett. The Mail talks about on page 3 today that if you are a camper by nature, you'll probably be a happier person than those who don't do it.
Well, maybe if you are a camper by nature, it is my idea of a nightmare.
Mine too.
I mean, I camped as a child.
Quite okay with camping.
You seem quite a happy person.
You wake up cold. There's nothing. And it's always sort of lumpy
and noisy. I just don't want to hear everybody else in the campsite.
I don't want to camp with other people. I don't like the idea of like camping at a festival or something like that.
Or in a campsite.
Where
you can hear everyone else's children and grumpy
and then you have
and all the rest of it.
Share everything.
On the
I mean, I just think. I mean, as a child, we used to go on holiday, and it wasn't. I mean, we'd actually sleep in a van because we never had any money, and it was just always awful. And it was that waking up,
condensation dripping off,
sore
the
throat.
Yeah.
Being woken by the sunrise at 3 a.m.
But I wouldn't want to do what Freddie does and sleep alone in a field. Unless I was sleeping with a shotgun.
Not alone, you know, with your partner or your family.
But who's screaming? There could be a wild cat or something prowling the field around you, ready to devour you, or...
Yes, I remember doing that in Africa and constantly... it was in my imagination, but I kept sort of hearing the growl of a lion, because there were lions nearby. I was convinced.
I can't get into tents, FYI.
No, I know, but I'm a scaredy cat.
I've slept under the stars in Jordan, actually, funnily enough. That was incredible. We had a fire next to us, which keeps wild things away. I enjoyed that. That didn't involve a tent, but it was...
So no covering?
Camping. No cover, just starlight and the ground.
No snakes?
Nothing.
Oh, I did that when I was young. I mean, I'd sleep on beaches and things like that. But I, like Freddie, when I was doing it in Africa, there were lots of monkeys around, and of course they would mimic lions.
Yes.
So you did think there were lions.
Mimic lions, that's clever, isn't it?
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Monkeys are very clever.
You see,
and it is scary in the middle of the night.
I do
hearing
strange things. Like on my Instagram account, I follow glamper vans, right? and I think, and I was liking a post that this glamper van company had made, and I thought to myself, who are you kidding, Eamonn? If I could drive the van out of the courtyard or whatever, I wouldn't know where I was bringing it to, and when I got there, how would I plug it in? And then the most important thing of all, when it comes to the loo, I would have no idea. I would have absolutely no idea. So you would use the loo and you would think, well, what do I do with this now? It has to be emptied, apparently.
You get someone to do it for you.
But that's what I'd want. I'd want somebody to do it for me, but I wouldn't have anybody to do it for me.
How many glamper social media accounts are you following?
Well, there's a number of them, and it's amazing, Freddie, that they have this high-tech, these vans that have cameras around them and all sorts of things, and you can go through fields and they have special tires and whatever, and then you anchor the vehicle once you get into a field. But I'm not really sure how I would do all of that. I like the idea of it, but I don't know when push comes to shove. You see, then you don't have to do the tent business. You can sleep indoors.
No, yeah, I can see that.
Like Scarlett was saying.
I slept in one of those VW camper vans. That was fun, but it doesn't have any facilities. It's literally just, you know, the driving seat, and then the sort of table and chairs becomes a bed. That was fun.
I think they do amphibious glamper vehicles.
Oh, yeah, you can go like a duck.
So you can just take the water.
Well, there's a whole world out there in glamper vans, I have to say. And then, of course, then you don't have to put them in your driveway, you just rent them.
I see a documentary with you going glamping around the countryside.
Oh, yes,
you and me together, wouldn't it?
Oh, God, no.
She was found dead.
I'll be the one taking the toilet
hanging
out.
in the portable loo.
Yes. Bicker.
Yeah.
We've got it on record, that now, just in case he does ever
I would be the
murder me.
main suspect, wouldn't I?
You would, actually. Because you would have done it.
Exactly.
Unless I drove with you, unless you shared it with me.
You're my witnesses. You'll testify at my murder trial.
Scarlett and Freddie back in 40 minutes' time. Let's bring you up to date with the top stories. Here they are.
Households have paid over £1 billion in higher mortgage payments since the mini-budget was announced last year. That's according to Labour's analysis by the Resolution Foundation. The party's accusing Prime Minister Rishi Sunak of being personally responsible for what they call the Tory mortgage penalty.
Interest rates predicted to rise again this week. Inflation remains high. Experts believe base rate will rise by 0.25%, totalling 4.5%.
Citizens Advice, the charity that helps with food bank referrals, says it's helped a record number of people this year. Higher bills and rents have left people struggling, with around 9,600 people a day asking for help on average.
Now, we talked about this earlier. We're now going live via satellite to day 2 of Northern Ireland's most anticipated food and agricultural event of the year. It is
the Balmoral Show. It is renowned for sheep shearing, show jumping, and attendees today might also be in for a surprise. Let's head over to speak to our reporter, Doogie Beattie. Good morning to you.
He's a farmer
Doogie.
himself.
Yes, a former farmer.
No, he's a farmer. He is a farmer.
Good morning, all of
Help
you.
me out, Doogie.
Yes, I would still knock around fields, but very much not farming. Don't tell taxman any of that sort of stuff, Eamonn. That's not right. Yes, you would still keep things going, yes, but I've been at this show since I was about 9 years of age, and I'm actually standing, well, it's moved, of course, it's moved to the old Maze prison site. It used to be right in the centre of Belfast, outside the King's Hall, and yes, many fond memories we had here, but the show has really fitted in to this new site. I wasn't a fan of it when it first came here. It was like a jigsaw puzzle, and over the years they've managed to fit it very, very nicely. I'm actually at the side of the arena here, the show jumping arena, and I can see the competitors actually pacing out the jumps here at the moment. We are dodging the rain showers at the moment, I must say. It has been quite showery yesterday and today, but when those showers are off, the weather is absolutely beautiful, and then all of a sudden the showers come back again. Yesterday was the pedigree day. That was very important important for the beef industry. That was the Charlies, the Limousines, the Belgian Blues, Samatals, all in there, and that is to do with the price of beef, of course, and what comes out in our butchery. Today is the commercial side judging in those two rings, and there is quite a buzz about the place. Usually we get a very high-profile visitor here on the second or third day. Of course, that's all kept quiet at the moment, but we are expecting someone here with probably today, probably in around lunchtime, and it should be a good day. But of course, the main problem here at lunchtime is the worry about interest rates. Farmers, of course, run massive overdrafts. Farms are a multi-million pound business, and it's not hard to find out where that sort of money goes in a farm. You know, you have fields, you have cows, your animals all together, your equipment, and indeed feed. And feed, of course, was one of those main things. And they have to take overdrafts and that. And yesterday I spoke with two of those in the industry that would be very much amongst our know what's going on. That of Michelle Sherlow of Food NI and Roger Pullen of the Federation of Small Businesses.
There's a big correlation, big pressure on producers because of the price of raw materials. We know that there's been a lot of food inflation, but we're even hearing from producers they're not passing on the full costs. So even though food price inflation has been 15 to 20%, people are still making less money than they would have been this time 18 months or 2 years ago. Well, my concerns on the interest rates are it's going to make it much harder for producers, and also strong currency will mean that imports will be in a more favourable position. So it's really a time when we need to step up and say support local produce, support local food and drink, and spend your money in that area.
By making it more expensive for people to borrow money, it just takes the spending power out of the economy. So lots of small businesses right across the whole of the country are going to see customers coming in with a little bit less money to spend, and that will have a ripple impact. Yes, it's intended to achieve the reduction in inflation, but it's doing it at a high price to small businesses.
Well, there you are, very much concerning amongst those that are in the know. Those interest rates could push food prices up even further because of the cash flow situation that will have to happen from that.
Yeah. And you know, Dougie, I think a visit to an agricultural show is great for people who aren't agricultural. I just think it gives a huge awareness of what goes on.
I do think it's great for kids to see and learn about what ends up on their plate.
Yeah, from farm to...
Yeah, well, it is. Yeah, well, it is farm gate to plate, as they say. But there is a whole community here inside agriculture, rural communities, even the small villages. These farms support many villages and they create wealth. But of course, it's becoming harder and harder. And we've noticed as well about those European laws that aren't being done away with at the moment inside the UK. That will cause problems as that interest rate rises. Well, last night the euro was about 86p. That's 14%. You can imagine that so strong sterling trying to compete inside the euro means goods are cheaper to buy in but harder to export them.
And you're getting a lot of showers there at the minute. I hope it brightens up for you as the day goes on. Equestrian events and showing events and all sorts of things going on there. I always remember, Dougie, they used to have in those days the Northern Ireland Milk Marketing Board, and they used to do a lot of promotions of ice cream. Oh, yeah. So as kids, we thought it was great because we always got free ice creams there.
Oh, well, yes, there's quite a few good ice cream companies here, I can assure you, at this minute. In some of the tents there, I have promised myself one in the next 2 days. They are very, very creamy. There's no doubt about it. It's not too much sugar, more cream.
Good stuff. Thank you very much. Stay with us at home. We're going to have more for you after this on today's interest rate expected hike a little bit later on.
Good evening from Buckingham Palace.
From Buckingham Palace.
We're at Buckingham Palace. Lots of things going on here. Crowds were cheering.
It was a week of joy, drama.
Good evening from the man has been arrested.
I want to give commendations to our camera crew.
And togetherness.
Are you nervous for tomorrow?
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
Thank you for celebrating with us. The coronation on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The government hits back at the Archbishop of Canterbury after he branded the immigration bill morally unacceptable.
Hello there, very good morning to you. 1 minute past 7, Thursday, the 11th of May. Breakfast on GB News, Eamonn Holmes and Isabel Webster.
Here's what's leading the news this morning. The Immigration Minister has entered into a row with the Archbishop of Canterbury, saying his criticisms of the legal migration bill fail to offer any alternative solutions. In a rare political intervention, Justin Welby said the legislation would hurt Britain's global standing.
Interest rates predicted to rise to their highest level since 2008 today, in what would be the Bank of England's 12th consecutive rise. Inflation in the country currently stands stubbornly at 10.1%.
Breaking overnight, Adam Price has quit as Plaid Cymru's leader after a damning report found misogyny, bullying and harassment within the party.
Also today.
Just so you understand, ready? I never met this woman. I never saw this woman.
Donald Trump has made his first public appearance since a jury found him to have sexually abused the writer E. Jean Carroll. During the fiery back and forth, he also said he would accept the results of the next election, but only if he thought it was a fair one.
And we've been nominated for a Trek Award this year, GB News Breakfast with Stephen and Ellie and with Eamonn and me. We've been nominated for Best Multi-Channel News Programme, and also Eamonn is also nominated for Best News Presenter. So if you would like to, we've created a little QR code you can see on the screen there, and that will make it super easy. You can use your smartphone and it will take you straight to the website to cast your vote. You only have until Friday. We'd be so grateful if you did.
Yeah, so those votes would be very, very much appreciated. Get voting. So the top story on this Thursday morning, ministers have clashed with the Archbishop of Canterbury after he attacked the government's illegal migration bill. He said it was morally unacceptable.
Justin Welby, who said the legislation had too many problems for one speech, warned it would damage the UK's standing in the world.
Daily Express political reporter Millie Cook is not here now with us on this one. Is this a predicted outcome of what the Archbishop said yesterday?
Yeah, I mean, I think over the previous weeks, the Archbishop's becoming increasingly vociferous in his criticism of the legislation. But it's also not unsurprising at all that the government has kind of immediately slapped him down. But while they have been trying to dismiss his criticisms, obviously he's a very prominent figure. Just look at the role he played in Charles III's coronation last week. I think Tories are going to be becoming increasingly nervous about such vocal criticisms of their bill.
I think the trouble with the Archbishop speaking out, as you say, he not least because he just crowned the King a few days ago and is highly respected, whether you're religious or not, is this allegation that it's immoral in some way. And I think that will prick people's consciences. The government, though, as you say, Downing Street, straight out of the gates to say this is compassionate and fair, and they do not accept that charge. Do they have a point? Because they're saying, actually, we can't actually take in all these people, many of whom are economic migrants. We have to try and have some sort of system so that we can best assist those who really need our help.
Absolutely. I think the crux of their argument also surrounds people smugglers. So the government, and Robert Jenrick specifically, is arguing that it's not moral to allow people smugglers to continue transporting people to the UK in kind of illegal and immoral ways. But that said, I think the Archbishop of Canterbury's argument is that the UK is sort of failing in its international obligation to take in asylum seekers and to look after refugees.
So what happens now? I mean, we know that the Archbishop is expected to stand down at some point soon. He's not expected to do so quietly. Do you think we're going to have more of this and the sort of delays and the criticisms that we saw in the Lords yesterday, making it very difficult for one of Rishi Sunak's 5 pillars to be fulfilled?
Absolutely. I think he's clearly not going quietly, and over the last few weeks he's really been getting louder and louder in his criticism, and he obviously feels very strongly about this. But it's really a problem for Rishi Sunak, because this legislation is deeply important for his mandate and for him to kind of win over his own party and also the country, because I think the Tory party definitely believes that as a nation, the UK really wants to gain control of their borders. Obviously, there are differing opinions there, but they do see it as being a central pillar of Rishi Sunak's government at the moment.
Interesting hearing what Lord Frost had to say yesterday. He said arguably hundreds of thousands, maybe millions, could have valid asylum claims. We simply can't take them all. And he claimed that the Archbishop's views, he actually said he rather resented them.
No, it definitely was tense in the debate yesterday. I think there was kind of this real back and forth over whether or not the government's legislation was the moral and right thing to do. And I think there's also a real feeling in the Tory party, especially, that the peers in the House of Lords who are against the legislation are going against the will of the people. Whether or not the whole of the UK thinks that, the Tories definitely believe that their constituents and the people who are voting for them really want to gain control of our borders. But also, I do feel like there are lots of people in the UK that want to kind of care for people from other nations and look after refugees. So it's not, I don't think it's a straight line issue.
If it was simple, they'd have sorted it out already. Millie Cook, thank you very much indeed, political reporter for the Daily Express. We've been asking you to get in touch with your views on all of this morning. Jean, thank you for your email. The Archbishop is totally wrong, she says. He does not live in the real world. And Andy says the Archbishop's views on immigration are irrelevant. The Church has no place in politics. Do you agree with Andy and Jean, or do you think he had a point? Let us know.
Stupid Andy. Of course the Church has a position in politics. That's what it's there for. That's why in the House of Lords as well. That's why he's the head of the Church of England, and if that is the religion of the country, then he has got a role in politics. Problem with you, Andy, is it's pricking your conscience. You're thinking, oh, morally, is the boss man right here? He's the leader of my church, if it is your church, and you're thinking you should be doing what he says and how he spiritually guides you. But a lot of people don't like being told what to do on that. I put it out there, please discuss. 7 minutes now past 7 o'clock, and Conservative MPs are accusing the government now of backtracking over its plans to scrap thousands of EU laws by the end of the year.
The so-called post-Brexit bonfire was supposed to see 4,000 laws being scrapped, but may now only see 800 being repealed. Let's cross to Downing Street, speak to our Deputy Political Editor, Tom Harwood. I think the front of the Telegraph describing it as Whitehall blob halts this EU bonfire. It's almost all-out war between civil servants and ministers, isn't it?
Well, we've got 20% of these laws may be repealed, Tom. Is that a good target, or is that just useless?
Well, I think to a lot of Conservative MPs, this feels like the government going back on a pledge that it made. The retained EU law bill, which has been making its way through the legislative process for quite some time, has on the face of the bill this idea that all EU law will be sunsetted by the 31st of December. By the end of the year, all EU law will be off our statute books apart from that is specifically retained. What the written ministerial statement from the Business and Trade Secretary yesterday afternoon said was basically to flip that entirely around, to invert the purpose of the bill. Instead of all of it falling away apart from that which is specifically retained, all of it will be kept apart from that which is specifically deemed to fall away. And this creates a bit of a raised eyebrows amongst those with the European Research Group, amongst those more Brexiteer-leaning members of Parliament, because they worry if all of the default becomes retaining this EU law in British statute books, then will it really go at all? We're told there are 4,000 odd of these laws, and on the face of the bill, my understanding is there will only be around 550, maybe up to 600 of these laws repealed. Now, that's a very small fraction. That's measuring in the hundreds rather than in the thousands. And one of the particular issues here is that this goes against a promise that the Prime Minister himself made when he was campaigning to become Prime Minister over last summer. He released a video, a campaign video, promising to set up a Brexit delivery department, using this very vivid metaphor of shredding all of this remaining EU law. He said that he would get rid of it all in his first 100 days. Well, instead of that happening, we're many hundred days into the Sunak administration, and this law is mainly still on our statute books.
OK, Tom Harwood, thank you very much.
Thanks, Tom. Meanwhile, the Bank of England predicted to rise interest rates today, 12th time in a row. This will be the highest level since 14 years ago.
Yeah, they'll have to do this because they're trying to battle stubborn inflation. Experts believe the base rate will rise by about 0.25%, so it should be around 4.5%. We will find out at midday.
OK, we'll now find out the take and the analysis from financial market analyst Fiona Cincotta on this one. Right, Fiona, does it stop here? I suppose that's the $64,000 question.
Completely. I mean, the thing is that we need to keep in mind here is inflation in the UK is still in double-digit figures. So, that's extremely high compared to, for example, the Eurozone, which has got 7%, or the US, where we saw inflation has cooled now to 4.9%. So, with that in mind, it's very difficult for the Bank of England to really hint that it will be pausing the interest rate hikes. I think we're much more likely to see the Bank of England keep that door open. So we know that the Bank of England expects inflation to start cooling more significantly as from April. But so far we don't have those figures. So it does need to just keep all options on the table. And I think we are going to see them actually upwardly revise their inflation target for the end of the year. At the moment, it's sitting at 4% at the end of the year. And I think that is going to be just pushed that little bit higher. But we're also probably going to see the growth forecast upwardly revise as well, which to a degree is good news. At the beginning of 2023, we were sort of, really concerned about the outlook for the UK economy, and it has held up better than we were expecting so far.
It's funny, we were speaking to you an hour ago, and we had a guest straight afterwards talking to us about Trump, and he'd heard what you were saying, and he was saying you might think that 4.9% inflation in the States is better, but actually by American standards, we're all up in arms about that. So it gives some context to what we're dealing with here. If they think 4.9% is high, what we've got is a huge problem. What are the risks, though, of keeping interest rates high? I mean, we've seen these vulnerabilities in the banking sectors starting to emerge. We also know that people are feeling the pain when it comes to mortgages as well.
Yes, that's right. So, I mean, the problem when you have high inflation for a long period of time is also it becomes embedded in the economy. So then we start to see people expect to see their wages go up, they'll continue spending, that means pressure, and it just keeps inflation high and it makes it very difficult to come down. So, I mean, the Bank of England will want to get that down, and the best way for them to do it, the biggest tool that they have, is by raising interest rates. But as you said, that does mean that that it will have an effect on the quality and the standard of life, especially because we're seeing that food inflation is where there's very high inflation, and that will naturally hit those in the lowest sort of sector income, or the lowest income sector of society. So that's where it's going to be really hard hit. And also, as we see those mortgages go up, that will hit people who are homeowners.
OK. Fiona Cincotta, thank you very much indeed. Fiona is a financial market analyst at City Index. Thank you. 13 minutes past 7 o'clock. Let's bring you up to date with what else is happening news-wise.
Adam Price has announced he's quitting as the leader of Plaid Cymru. The decision comes just days after a review found that the Welsh Nationalist Party has a culture of harassment, bullying and misogyny.
Government plans to remove thousands of EU laws from Britain's statute book by the end of this year have now been altered. The Business Secretary says potentially only 800 will now be revoked under the retained EU law bill instead of a proposed 4,000.
The former US President Donald Trump would not label Russian leader Vladimir Putin a war criminal. When pressed on the subject of Ukraine during a town hall event on CNN last night, Trump said he didn't think of the war in terms of winning or losing, but that he would end it in 24 hours. See the reports then that came out of Bucha where women had been raped, murdered, maimed, children had been thrown into mass graves.
You know, and then you cannot pass comment on things like this because there's a little hardcore of Trumpites out there who think, oh, you're knocking Donald again, the Donald again. I mean, that's just stupid. To say that Putin's not a war criminal, to say that he doesn't relish murdering people in Ukraine with those indiscriminate missile strikes, to say the least, all sorts of things. And people like Trump, I would end this war in 2 days. How, Donald? How would you do that? And then also that you're not dealing with a war criminal here. You're dealing with the biggest war criminal since Adolf Hitler in that situation. But anyway,
That's not our opinion. The International Criminal Court are looking to try and get their hands on Putin. So that's his view versus Donald Trump's view. Coming up, we're going to be asking if we should be able to pick our child's attributes or if a scientific step too far.
Like all their best bits.
Babies.
Designer babies.
Discussing next.
Right.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News. The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
Right, folks, that was a spicy one, wasn't it?
With us four, plus a special guest.
Sometimes she has to stick her foot in it. Sometimes she has to say things as they are.
Sometimes I think we should keep the refugees and send the pensioners to Rwanda. Then we'd be in a much better state.
Well, Benjamin, that is...
The Saturday 5. Saturday nights from 8. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Just to tell you what's still coming on the programme this morning, 10 minutes time, we'll be asking the government about its big £1 million, nearly 40 million quid, to crack down on stalkers and domestic abusers.
Then, just after 8 o'clock, as we await a potential 12th consecutive interest rate rise, we'll find out how the hospitality industry is coping with double-digit inflation. We know the cost of food is absolutely crippling at the moment.
The cost of food, the cost of energy, keeping on the cost of staff, the unavailability. I mean, we had a restaurant in Belfast closed down 2 days ago, and it's just such a shame. And the
one
guy,
on the end of my road just closed, where I had my baby shower that you came to. That's just closed.
Yeah, and the guy said he just can't get staff. He just can't, so all these people who say, Brexit didn't cost us anything, whatever. Fine, I just again ask, what happened to all the staff that used to work in the hospitality industry, that used to work in the NHS, that used to work in picking our crops and things? What happened to all of those people? Anyway.
You can join in any of our discussions by emailing gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet us at GBNews. Now, yesterday, we learned about the arrival of the first ever British baby created from 3 genetic parents using a brand new IVF procedure.
Now, the mind boggles about all of this, but this method has sparked a debate as to whether or not society is going too far with designer baby technology. It has to be said that a lot of this is about getting rid of medical deficiencies and
mitochondrial
genes and
conditions such as heart problems and the like.
A lot of us, I think, would agree and say if you can prevent anything like that, it's fine. But we're now talking about, you could say, I want my child with blue eyes, or a green eye and a blue eye.
Or to be a boy or a girl. Or...
Yes, or to have blonde hair or not blonde hair, whatever it is. Where does this bring us? We have a columnist at the Universe.
Catholic Universe.
Yes, please. I was
sorry,
about to explain
you missed that bit.
No, I am a Catholic. Are you a subscriber to the Universe yourself?
I'm in the Universe.
Once a week.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Got
Caroline, I'm basically making the point is I know where you are and who you're from. Caroline Farrow there, she believes that these technologies are an immoral, I quote, a moral scientific pursuit. And then beside her, scientist embryologist Elise Daniel Barnes. Elise thinks patients have a legal right to choose these things. And they both join us now.
Very good morning to you both. Can we start, first of all, from a scientific point of view, Elise, just separating out this mitochondrial development, this 3 donor parent baby from the designer baby debate, because that is specifically to try and help families that are repeatedly having children with these inherited diseases who die within 24 hours, whatever it might be, heart conditions and the like. And however controversial it might be, it is like 0.1% of the egg donor, isn't it? So just explain how that is different from designer babies, first of all.
Yeah, absolutely. So these are procedures that we, are using a much less frequent basis as it sounds. This is the first one that's come about, but it's really to try to bring a healthy child into the world to loving parents who are wanting a healthy baby. And so we haven't gotten to a point yet where we are selecting for things like, hair color, eye color, height, and those sorts of things. Our focus right now is healthy babies.
Okay, that may be your focus. Where it would lead to, Caroline, is what worries you, of course. With what Elise has said so far, are you with her with where we're at so far?
I'm completely with Elise for the desire for babies to be born healthy. But I think we have to remember that the ends doesn't justify the means. So for this technology to work, first off, it creates, for every baby that's born as a result of this procedure, 2 other embryos are destroyed, which, from an ethical point of view is problematic. Secondly, we don't know whether or not this technique is going to be successful in the long term. So there have been some cases of mitochondrial reversal in the womb, meaning, that the unborn child does develop a disease, but we don't know the long-term effects of this. So this is why the individuals who are being born via this process are, being studied long-term to discover is the rest of their genome, the factors that go towards the rest of their development, are they affected in any way? And also, how is this passed on to future generations? So it is a form of human experimentation, and the road to hell, as they say, is always paved with good intentions. So while we can understand the desire to want a healthy baby, of course that's completely natural, or to help infertile parents, we don't know where this is going to lead further down the line. I know that Elise said that we're not at the point of selecting eye colour and hair colour and other attributes yet, but we could be. And then that leads to a whole other debate about, commoditising humanity, commoditising babies, certainly.
Yeah, and I just want to pick up on a couple of those things. And I agree, the scientific community say there is no consensus about the long-term effects of this 3-donor baby thing. They don't know whether or not there will be this reversal of things later on down the line. But you did say that the problem for you was the destruction of a couple of the embryos. Now, of course, that happens whenever parents use IVF to conceive. Millions of embryos are destroyed around the world, probably every day. So presumably, Caroline, you object to even IVF, let alone anything that is a sort of medical termed development like this.
Yes, certainly. I think certainly from a Catholic ethical point of view, I do. But actually, there are plenty of other secular reasons to object to IVF. And now, again, it's a really understandable procedure. Of course, people want to. Infertility is a horrible burden, and I'm not minimising it. But I always think IVF acts as a sticking plaster in that it doesn't solve the underlying causes of fertility. It tries to circumnavigate them. And, from a purely sort of secular and statistical point of view, it's got quite a low success rate anyway. But I think as well with 3-parent babies, you are, even though it's a tiny amount of mitochondria, you are introducing new genetic material into a human being. And every single human being, we have this innate desire for identity. We want to know who we are, where we're from, what our legacy is.
Well, Caroline, I want to know what Elise thinks. I want to bring Elise back in because she's all the way in Las Vegas for goodness knows what time of the day or night that it is. So we do appreciate you being with us, Elise. But basically, I wonder, is there any difference in the way this is viewed in the USA where you are and in the UK where we are? And basically, I know you sort of believe parents have the legal right to choose their baby's gender, and you're thinking, what's the big deal? Get over it. Whose business is it outside theirs?
Yeah, I will say there are some differences between the UK and the US. In general, our regulations around IVF are a little bit more lax than in the UK. And there's pros and cons to both of that. But ultimately, as a professional in the field, it's not my place to infringe on what a patient's wishes are. Whether I agree or not, ultimately it's not my choice. It's the patient's choice. And until we have other regulations that change that, I have to set my own personal, thoughts aside and say, hey, they have this legal right to do this. And, that's their wishes. And we have to respect that at that point.
Caroline?
Well, and that's an admirable sort of ethical, I understand where Elise is coming from, put it that way. But the problem is when we start choosing what sex our baby is, we are then imposing our own expectations onto that child. And how fair is that on the child? And where do we go with this? What else do we start choosing? At the moment, if you don't have that choice, which naturally we don't, the balance of male and female, is roughly sort of 50-50.
Elise,
but then you have
Caroline's point is basically that we're doing this at the moment. What will it be next? And and I know that the temptation has to be designer babies. The further along the road we go with all of this, and the more used to people get to choosing certain characteristics.
I agree. I mean, there's definitely a time where things can go down the line into some of these other things and designer babies and that sort of thing. But I also challenge that it's not that we're far off from that now. With patients who have to move to donor gametes, donor eggs, donor sperm, they don't have to choose a donor that looks like them or that has the same IQ as them. There's already some of that we're seeing, and that's being allowed. And that is currently the patient's choice. Because they can choose a donor that looks like Brad Pitt or looks like Kim Kardashian.
Or Eamonn Holmes.
Exactly.
Yes,
and
exactly. Guys, we've got to leave it there. Elise and Caroline, thank you both very much indeed. You got everybody talking about that. So let me know, right? You like your fashion, you love your babies, you love everything. Could you see yourself succumbing to that thing, saying, no, I'd like her better if she had red hair?
No, God, no. It's one of the best things about having children
surprise.
is the chocolate box surprise. Yeah, you open it, you don't know what you're going to get. I didn't even... Well, actually, I lie. I did find out what I was having because I wanted to know the gender, but I wouldn't have it any other way. Whatever I was given was a blessing.
I think the way people are used to say... what am I thinking of? What are those things on the... Instagram, but filters. People are used to filters and whatever and things. So would they not try and do it in real life and say,
maybe, yeah,
I hope my baby doesn't inherit my ears, for instance, or you would take that into account. It's only human nature. Yeah. It's only human nature. But there's where we are. Designer babies, has technology gone too far? Now, police forces with the time at 7:30. Yes, it is 7:30. Across England and Wales will be given new powers to weed out domestic abuse and stalking behaviour. There's 40 million quid behind this.
Well, let's speak to the Parliamentary Under-Secretary, Sarah Dines, with her thoughts on all of this. Just explain to us how you're toughening up the legislation then around these issues.
Well, I'm very excited to be able to say that we have announced to police and crime commissioners across the whole nation that we're spending £39 million, and that's really going to change the lives of people who have been stalked. People are in terror. These are vile crimes. Domestic abuse, including stalking, really affects everybody's lives, and we're spending a lot of money to help prevent it.
Who's doing the stalking, Sarah? Because I often look at this and I think we could think it's people with, really evil intentions and whatever, or it's people who are just mentally disturbed. And I think a lot of them are just mentally disturbed. So it's not just your budget would be going and preventing them. Who's then going to look after them and retrain these people in the ways of the world?
Well, it's a wide section of the population, and sometimes people aren't mentally disturbed. They're just obsessive, or they think they're in love. But yes, they do have psychological problems, a lot of these people, which is why we're spending part of this money to implement training, specialist training for police officers, but also psychologists who will disrupt and prevent that sort of behaviour. Some of the projects that we've run, like the Drive project we've been doing for 7 years, it's up to 80% effective. You can work with a proportion of this sort of obsessive personality, and it's about saving people and stopping terror. These victims really feel terror within their own homes and are frightened to go out at times. So it's specialist intervention. I'm so pleased the government are doing this.
Just explain then exactly how that specialist intervention will be distributed, because we know there's always a shortage of officers on the beat. You say there's going to be some psychologist help as well. I mean, how many people are we talking? Because we're seeing these crimes increase. Let's not pretend we're not.
Well, we're going to have 50 different projects funded, and each of those projects will have multiple people. Some will be, the majority will be police officers and psychologists, and there's extra training to make sure we get the right sort of people working in this field. And we also work in conjunction with other organisations, other stakeholders, social services, proper training for social workers as well as police officers. And we've developed a new tool to enable police officers, particularly the newer ones who need training, who are coming. And don't forget, the government's actually achieved the committed promise for 20,000 new police officers. They need specialist training, and we're rolling that out. So the tool that we have will help people spot some of this abuse, because sometimes it's not thoroughly obvious. And members of the public might think that neighbour isn't a stalker, when actually we know from that behaviour that they are a stalker. So a lot of work's been done.
What else do you know from work that has been carried out? I mean, is there anything that you do that you know this is money well spent, this change happens? Because a lot of these people are repeat offenders.
Well, that's why the most serious repeat offenders are going to be on the violent and sexual offenders register and more closely monitored on a day-to-day basis. I've had the privilege of visiting several of these schemes, like the Drive Project in Hampshire, with Donna Jones, who's the local police and crime commissioner there. What the police officers do is they disrupt and they prevent. They turn up, they do home visits, they turn up unexpectedly. And there are some rules now whereby the most serious offenders can be forced to go on special courses where they learn about their behaviour. And as I mentioned earlier, some of these can be 75 to 80% successful. So there is academic research, and it's been proved to work. You can disrupt this sort of behaviour.
Sarah Dines, can I ask you what you made of the Archbishop of Canterbury's intervention on the illegal immigration bill yesterday? He described it as morally unacceptable. Do you agree?
Well, I do respect, I respect it very much, and the House of Lords is a really precious, important part of our Constitution. However, with the greatest respect, I don't agree with what he said. I just don't think it is moral to allow people such as traffickers to bring people, including children, across the Channel, risking their lives for money. I mean, that's what it is, and that's where the immorality lies.
Right, but there wouldn't be this problem with the Channel, would there, if there were safe and legal routes for people to get into this country to then seek asylum?
There are safe and legal routes. We've been a very, very generous country. Since 2015, we've offered homes to 500,000 immigrants who have sought sanctuary in this country. We are a kind country, but what we can't do is to allow the criminal gangs to usurp the proper process. We want people to come here when they need help, not because they may be asylum shopping, as the Migration Minister said yesterday. So with the greatest respect, I don't agree with him. I think we're doing the right thing. It was passed by the House of Commons by a large majority, and this is what the people want. So we do listen to the House of Lords, but with the greatest respect, I disagree on where the morality lies on this one.
What about the failure to repeal Brexit laws? Labour Party describing it this morning as an embarrassing U-turn.
Well, Sir Keir Starmer knows all about embarrassing U-turns. It's not quite a U-turn. It's a more calculated, calm way of getting rid of some of these laws. We don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. We need to make sure we get rid of those laws which we don't need, and we keep some which are compatible with what we want to do in this country. So the Prime Minister has managed to get rid of about 800 so far, and I know that each government department is working incredibly hard, including the Home Office, including me, to look at exactly what we need to keep and what needs to go. So I don't agree with Sir Keir Starmer. That won't surprise you.
But do you think there are problems within the civil service and ministers? I mean, some people describing it as virtually all-out war. You know, Kemi Badenoch blaming this on the Blob, on Whitehall.
I don't think it's all-out war. It's just a very huge task. We're changing our constitutional arrangements by leaving, and I fully support Brexit. What we need to do is keep the best, but get rid of all the rest that we don't need. And we're doing that in a proper way. There is a framework to this. It's not all made up, as Sir Keir Starmer would think. We've been working incredibly hard on this, and I know ministers are taking a lot of time. Kemi Badenoch has pointed out it is a huge job. We have to reverse what's been years of just accepting laws from another institution without any democratic say. So I'm pleased the government is doing this in a proper, measured, thorough way.
Well, Sarah Dines, I reckon anyone who declared war on you would know all about it. I think they'd live to regret it. You're full of energy, you're full of enthusiasm there. We wish you all the best for what you're trying to do, taking care of stalkers and domestic abusers, an awful and too often silent problem within the country. Thanks for explaining that to us. Thank you very much indeed, and good luck.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, thank you.
Right, stay with us.
Excuse me.
Go on.
See, there you're off. You're off again. Where are you off again
I'm
to?
off to the races.
I was talking about, have you ever been stalked?
I haven't actually, but my best friend has, and it was awful.
Yeah, I've been stalked.
Yeah, I remember. They turned up at Sky, didn't they?
Yes, they turned up on my holidays, different ones. And then I had this woman who...
Oh no, he's gone. Whilst you recover, go on.
Well, it was just an awful sight. It was an awful sight.
On your holidays?
No, this was a different time. There's been many stalkers in my life, many stalkers. And this woman spread-eagled across my car bonnet. And she was like a big X shape, right? And she tied herself to the four corners of the front of my car.
As you said,
well, it wasn't funny. We had to get four very burly men to cut her ropes and take her off my car. There was a dent in my bonnet.
Oh my gosh.
What could I do about that?
What would she have done if she got her hands on you?
There was a dent in my bonnet. There, I said,
shouldn't laugh. It's a really serious issue.
No, but it was, and she would write me letters and send me pictures.
I got some nasty letters. That doesn't really count as stalking.
They weren't nasty letters. They were loving letters.
Yeah.
But there was been an awful lot of people. I have had very young stalkers and very old stalkers, and and the ones in the middle stalkers. But when people decide,
showing off now.
No, I'm saying. I tell you, the worst one was the child stalker, because that's really difficult to deal with, because they're not adults and whatever. But anyway, we could talk about this.
We could.
Since you don't want to talk about it, you're edging me.
I do.
No, you don't. I can tell that you're itching to move on to something else. What are you itching to move on to?
Not at all. Well, we were going to just tease to the break. I'm not allowed to say that word. I've just said it. You mainly said, what do you want to do? I want to do what I'm told to do.
I couldn't care less, do what I'm told to do.
Send
but
help.
you know, if you'd have seen my car,
really?
It was a beautiful car. It was a Toyota Celica.
Did she pay for the damage?
Oh no, she was.
Did she get a restraining order?
Yes, basically had to. And then I had a police officer who became fixated with me.
Goodness sake.
And she used to write me notes in parking tickets and stick them on my car.
Yeah. I know of another police officer that stalked somebody in my family. Yeah, that was bad. But my best friend, she's a GP, and hers was a patient, and he came into her room. She dealt with him, and then he fixated on her, and then I broke into the doctor's surgery. It was awful. Followed her home. She's got 3 little girls.
But Sarah Dines is going to do something about it there, so it was very interesting to talk to her. Let's take a break. Back with the papers after this.
The B word.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the people's channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I have walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know, Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. 7:44 is the time. Let's bring you up to date with today's front pages, starting with the Mail. They're outraged with the Archbishop of Canterbury. They say, what's so moral about not stopping people smugglers?
The Mirror says 400,000 people in Britain need specialist care for long COVID.
The Sun says this morning presenters Holly Willoughby and Philip Schofield are barely speaking to one another. The paper says Willoughby could carry on presenting the ITV show without him.
And the Star reveals white vests have now been backed by fashionistas.
Including Eamonn, Holmes and our producer Charlie.
Well, I don't know. I'm a hot person, so I wouldn't wear a vest.
Producer Charlie, I can confirm, is wearing one today.
But he's a skinny little rake, isn't he? He is.
I thought you were going to say
he's very
He's trim.
Gangly.
He's trim.
Isn't he?
Someone who's not so trim, Freddie, not you.
Came out of nowhere. Out of nowhere. Brutal. Unwarranted abuse.
Sorry, we try to do segues. Sometimes they're artful, sometimes they're catastrophic. But I was trying to segue into Trump, who's not a skinny little rake.
Yes.
Anyway, he is the Republican favourite, irrespective of his ongoing legal headaches.
Yes, and indeed, I think the lawfare against him, which is what it is in many ways, I mean, whatever you think about it, there's an enormous number of prosecutions against him. There wouldn't be this enormous number of prosecutions against him if it wasn't Donald Trump. It's backfiring. If you look at the polls, it's backfiring. If you look at what's happened in the polls since...
For who?
Meaning what? It's making him more popular.
For the Democrats.
I can't believe so basically this is making him more electable, not less electable.
Yes, it's doing exactly what happened in 2016, which is he's sucking all the oxygen out of the political conversation. And this makes him more popular and people sympathise with him about this.
But is it increasing his base? Because my understanding, he's got about 30% of the Republican supporters of the kind of MAGA crowd. But it's those kind of floating voters, those female voters, independent voters, who will probably just swing towards Biden, who probably aren't that enamoured with anyway, because they can't cope with all of the drama and the noise and the
misogyny and the abuse.
The Democrats are betting that independents will be put off enough by this by November, particularly women with the sexual abuse allegations, convictions in a way now. But some Republican strategists say, and I don't think they're necessarily wrong, that actually independents are not as averse to Trump as Democrats think they are.
Is that right?
And that a lot of independents are more concerned about the economy. They're not happy with Joe Biden. Joe Biden's poll numbers at the moment are terrible. And so you're going to have this repeat of
Well, you say that, but the so-called red wave didn't happen in the midterms, and it's pretty normal at this stage in the electoral cycle for his poll ratings to be bad. I mean, can we write off Joe Biden, or is Trump really going to suck all the energy and oxygen out of this debate, Scarlett?
No, Scarlett. The bottom line.
Yes,
the bottom line is this, right? You've got someone in public profile, someone who's going to lead the most powerful country in the world, who has the most disgusting moral background, right? Things that he said about women, things that he's now being convicted of against women. How on earth that would not be allowed to happen in this country?
No, I mean, it is quite incredible. And also, I mean, Freddie is, of course, quite right about being a lawfare. I mean, we've still got what happened on January the 6th to come up, where it is not yet, it is alleged, but I mean, most of us think it's true, that actually Trump encouraged a whole crowd of people, to take over Congress. But I mean, also, Trump still refuses to acknowledge that he lost the election. He lost the election by millions. I mean, it wasn't a close call. And it is really, really scary. And the fact that very few Republicans will come out and say, this man isn't fit to be president. I mean, how can we have him possibly coming back and running the most powerful country in the world?
Also, how offensive is it to ordinary right-thinking Republicans to hear him say, I don't think Putin's a war criminal? Well, the International Criminal Court has issued an arrest warrant for him. Does that not offend people?
Well, yes, and actually for some of his supporters, probably the thing that offends him most is him claiming that he built the wall. Which he did again last night, which he didn't do. He said, I finished it, and that's just not true. But on the sexual abuse case, yes, I've read into this quite a lot in the last couple of days. It's a very, very odd case. I mean, he was not found guilty of rape. It was a civil court that found him liable for sexual abuse and defamation, and the bigger fine of the 5 million, 3 million of it, was for defamation, for what he said about the woman who was accusing him. It's her testimony and the testimony of some of her friends who she spoke to against his, which is, I don't know the woman. And that's it. And there's this very odd detail about which Trump's lawyers put to her about the fact that it's also an episode of Law and Order. Do you know about this? So Law and Order, the TV show, there's an episode which has a sort of rape fantasy scene, or a scene about a rape fantasy in Bergdorf Wardman, which is the department store in New York. Am I saying that right? Yeah. Bergdorf. And it's just quite odd that it's in the lingerie section, and her allegations about the rape happening in the lingerie section. Bit curious. She was asked about this, and she said, "Oh yes, that is odd. I have seen it, but that's not why."
I would love, and I haven't heard. I would just love to know the detail. What were they doing in a lingerie section of a department store? And how did they end up in a changing booth?
Well, yes, and Donald Trump's defence, and I think, it's not a bad one, is he said, I'm one of the most famous people in the world. Do you really think I'm going to go into a lingerie section of a department store and rape someone? I mean, possibly,
well,
yes, if you're that much of a psychopath.
There was the testimony of two other females that also described him putting their hands up his skirt, grabbing them by the breasts, forcibly kissing them. We've had his own voice on that awful tape describing how, people don't even try and stop him. So you can't put it past him.
Well, I mean, I just think, allegations of rape should be taken seriously, and that's as it should be. But I think he will now be called a sexual abuser because a court has called him a sexual abuser. But that's not necessarily right.
Well, I think he is a sexual abuser because he speaks about it quite openly, about grabbing people by their pussy, by kissing whenever he feels like it, whatever. I mean, he is a sexual abuser, and I mean, had he been found innocent or not guilty, we would say that he's not. I mean, I think if a court finds you guilty, you just have to say that he.
I'm going to disagree. Sorry, I don't think talking in a vulgar way about sexual matters makes you a sexual abuser.
But he talked about what he'd done and how easy it was and how he could do whatever he wanted. I mean, he bragged about being a sexual abuser. I mean, maybe he's a fantasist. I mean, I would...
He's undoubtedly a
fantasist. Yeah, he is a fantasist. But on the tape, there is no question that he bragged about what he could do.
I just have to apologise for the term used to describe genitalia there. I know it was what he used, but we're not allowed to use that phrase. Shall we change the subject?
Let's talk about Eurovision.
Yes.
So, Freddie, in the Mail, there may be quite a lot of European Union flags flying in the audience because it is the Eurovision Song Contest.
Yes.
But this mightn't go down well.
Anti-Brexit campaigners are going to sort of disrupt, in a way, Eurovision, but they won't, not in a hostile way. They're just going to flood it with EU flags as a sort of they're calling it anti-Brexit propaganda coup by throwing lots of flags. And I think, who cares, really? I mean, I don't mind the EU flag being everywhere, but I also think it's odd because Eurovision isn't an EU event. There's Israel's in there. Ukraine,
Australia was in it.
It's not Australia. Yeah, it's not really a sort of EU thing, and I think to sort of try and identify it as this nice, cuddly EU thing that we like, and the reason why we should be in the European Union is just wrong.
Have they not noticed that we did extremely well in the last Eurovision Song Contest, coming in second post-Brexit?
Post-Brexit.
So it's actually helped us.
It's been a boon for our music.
Well,
if nothing else.
I think straight after Brexit it wasn't, but actually they did it for the proms. I mean, I think it's perfect if you want to wave a European flag. I think that's absolutely fine. I mean, I think actually it'll be even prettier. I think it'll be great fun. I mean, they don't only do it for EU things; they do it occasionally.
Scarlett and Freddie, we have to leave it there. It's been a pleasure. More from both of them just after 8:30, and we'll be back after this.
Good morning. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update with me, Annie Shuttleworth from the Met Office. Now today, after a brighter start, we will see some showers breaking out and a risk of thunderstorms once again. The reason it's been quite so unsettled is because we've got low pressure that's bringing some quite unstable air across the UK throughout today, but things will start to settle down as we head into the weekend. So some sunshine first thing across central and southern areas of England, as well as central and western areas of Scotland, but by lunchtime, we will start to see some pretty heavy downpours breaking out. Another risk of thunderstorms, particularly across the eastern side of the country, where the rain could last for quite a while and lead to some quite large puddles and surface water flooding as well. Though in any sunshine away from the showers, particularly across western areas, it will feel warm, highs of 16 or 17 degrees later on. Then through this evening, things will turn much drier and we'll start to see our winds shift, and that's going to drag in some low cloud from the North Sea. So quite a misty and murky night to come tonight, particularly over any coastal areas and high ground, but temperatures again around average for the time of year by the time we get to tomorrow morning. So quite a misty start tomorrow, apart from across the far western areas where we'll see some sunshine from the get-go. The cloud will burn back through the afternoon. However, many eastern areas will stay quite cool and cloudy throughout much of the day. And so temperatures here will be slightly suppressed, closer to 11 or 12 degrees. However, in that sunshine, feeling more like 17 or 18 degrees. Now, that warm weather will become more widespread for Saturday as we see a good amount of sunshine across the country. But the next batch of rain will arrive from the west on Sunday. Have a lovely day.
Good evening from Buckingham Palace. From Buckingham Palace. We're at Buckingham Palace. Lots of things going on here. Crowds were cheering.
It was a week of joy, drama.
Good evening from the man has been arrested.
I want to give commendations to our camera crew.
And togetherness.
Are you nervous for tomorrow?
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
Thank you for celebrating with us. The coronation on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prisons? I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel. Britain's news channel.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News. The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
Right, folks, that was a spicy one, wasn't it?
With us four, plus a special guest.
Sometimes she has to stick her foot in it. Sometimes she has to say things as they are.
Sometimes I think we should keep the refugees and send the pensioners to Rwanda. Then we'd be in a much better state.
Well, Benjamin,
The Saturday 5. Saturday nights from 8. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The government heads back at the Archbishop of Canterbury after he branded the immigration bill morally unacceptable.
A very good morning. You're welcome to the programme. It's 8 o'clock on Thursday, the 11th of May. This is Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn, Holmes and Isabel Webster.
Thank you very much indeed for your company. Leading our news this morning on radio, online, on TV, the Immigration Minister has now entered into a row with the Archbishop of Canterbury, saying his criticisms of the illegal migration bill failed to offer any alternative solutions. In a rare political intervention, Justin Welby said the legislation would hurt Britain's global standing.
UK interest rates are predicted to rise to their highest level since 2008 today, and what would be the Bank of England's 12th consecutive rise. Inflation in the UK currently stands stubbornly at 10.1%.
Adam Price has quit as Plaid Cymru leader after a damning report found misogyny, bullying and harassment within the party. More on that later.
Also today.
Just so you understand, ready? I never met this woman. I never saw this woman.
Donald Trump has made his first public appearance since a jury found him to have sexually abused the writer E. Jean Carroll. During the fiery back and forth, he also said he'd accept the results of the next election only if he thought it was fair.
And a little favour to ask you. Now you see Trick Awards 2023 Big Industry Award. GB News Breakfast with myself and Isabel, Ellie and Stephen has been nominated as the multi-channel news programme. Contender there. So there's a lot. We're up against every other breakfast station and indeed various other news programmes throughout the day. Your vote, if you log on and you use that little, what's that called, Isabel? That's
QR code.
A QR code. If you put your phone against that, it brings you straight through. Just take a photograph of that on your phone and it brings you straight through to the voting page. And please, they'll be very, very welcome to register your votes in the GB News categories. Thank you.
And you only have until Friday to do it, so do it soon if you will. Thank you.
OK, leading the news on this Thursday morning, ministers have clashed with the Archbishop of Canterbury after he attacked the government's illegal migration bill as being morally unacceptable.
Justin Welby, who said the legislation had too many problems for one speech, warned it would damage the UK's standing in the world.
Well, let's now speak to Harry Phibbs from the Tory supporting blog Conservative Home. Too many problems for one speech, Harry?
Well, I think the Archbishop of Canterbury is entitled to give us moral guidance, but then that's having the right motive. And I think that the government's motive is to say that we should stop the illegal people traffickers and that we should have as many genuine refugees as is practical. I don't think the Archbishop of Canterbury is suggesting that we can have open borders and let anybody in the world who wants to come and live here. So therefore we end up with an argument about detail in a way, about the practicalities of it all. And I think therefore it's reasonable challenge to the Archbishop of Canterbury to say, right, if you're going to get stuck into politics and say this is a bad policy, and presumably you accept what's happening at the moment is bad, then what's your alternative? And that's the challenge he hasn't really come up with. And I think actually he's wrong in the sense of saying, oh well, the rest of the world will take a very dim view. I think if we find this policy is effective of saying that people who come here will be moved to Rwanda and processed there, and that will then stop the incentive for people coming over from France on this hazardous journey, I think you might well find that other countries are looking for that approach as a practical way of trying to manage it.
It depends, Harry, if we're looking at what he's saying as political guidance or moral guidance. For instance, you are a member of the Church of England. He is your spiritual leader. Would you follow him if he said, look, religiously, morally, this is not right?
No, and when I go to church, the intercessions, we pray for God to give our leaders wise guidance. We don't say to them, right, overseas aid should be 0.7% of GDP, not 0.8% or whatever, or there should be this quota of refugees rather than a different quota. And I think if the church tries to start getting into that detail, then it ceases to be above politics. And so really the Archbishop of Canterbury should be coming onto your programme and facing just as rigorous questions as you would to a politician, saying, well, OK, this is your idea. What about, would that work? How would you do that? Say no limit, and that's the difficulty, because that's not the traditional idea of an Archbishop of Canterbury.
I mean, Harry, you're really suggesting that, because I'm sure that would be problematic, would it not, for the government if he was to do that? Because, I mean, we know that he's thinking of retiring soon. He's not likely to go quietly. He's very strong on this issue. We're likely to hear more from him on it. Every time he does it, he's needling at those people's consciences, traditionally probably conservative, Middle England voters who do go to church on a Sunday, who do see them as their leader, as well as being conservative voters, and he's pricking their consciences. It's problematic. You can't deny it.
He might be trying to prick their consciences, but I think that if they profoundly disagree with him and they feel that what we've got at the moment is immoral and the government have got a moral motive in trying to resolve things, then if he's got a better idea, then he should come forward and say it. I mean, it's rather like if he says, we should spend more on overseas aid. There are lots of people who believe that the best way to deal with poverty in developing countries is through trade and investment, and that giving money to quite often corrupt, quite often dictatorships that are running those countries is counterproductive. So you can have an argument about whether overseas aid is effective or not, and people who are moral and want to help reduce poverty can disagree about the methods of doing it, and people who want to provide sanctuary for people fleeing persecution can argue about whether the priority should be taking genuine refugees from the refugee camps or allowing people to come over from France using people smugglers. These are valid arguments that people who want a moral outcome can disagree about.
What about the front of the FT, I think, is interesting today. They're talking about net migration, and it's expected to possibly be as much as 700,000 next year. Now, when we talk about illegal crossings, that would be sort of 60,000, something like that, small fraction of that. And it looks like Rishi Sunak is going to try and tackle this as well in terms of visas for families of students that come over, particularly I think it's from Nigeria, and I can't remember the other country. I mean, this is a problem for him, and many people would say that he likes the small boats to distract from his inability to get migration down. Oh,
it's a huge problem, that migration. And actually, what people who want to have more genuine refugees coming here illegally and settling here, they should be trying to cut back on the illegal entrance, and also to try and get stronger control of immigration, because then it would be more practical for us to take more refugees. And so those are the sort of balances that exist in real life, and that's the practical policies which the Archbishop of Canterbury needs to consider, I think.
OK, Harry, really appreciate your take. Harry is a local government editor for Conservative Home. Thank you very much indeed for your opinions. In finance matters now, the Bank of England predicted to raise interest rates for the 12th time in a row today. That will be the highest level in 14 years. Yeah, they're trying to tackle stubborn inflation. Experts believe the base rate will rise by around 0.25%, so it should be about 4.5% when they make the announcement at midday. Head of Financial Analysis at AJ Bell, Danny Hewson, with her take on all of this. Danny, when will we hear what's happened?
We'll hear at noon today exactly what the Bank of England has decided to do. Now, last time they made the decision, they did vote to increase the rate by 0.25%, something we're expecting today. But actually, 2 members voted against that, to hold rates as they are. So I think the vote might be split today. But yes, certainly markets are pricing in a 0.25 percentage point hike, taking it to 4.5%. The big question, of course, though, is where does it go next? And certainly at the moment, markets are anticipating at least one more interest rate hike of about 0.25%, but potentially interest rates going all the way to 5% towards the summer.
And is that, I mean, you know, for people with mortgages and also all these sort of, we talk about the vulnerabilities in the banking sector, we don't want to see interest rates here. How worrying is it?
I think for a lot of people who have a mortgage, it will be incredibly worrying. Lots of people took out a 2-year fixed rate mortgage during COVID. There were a lot of movements around. So that was at an ultra low rate of just over 2%. If they're trying to fix now, they're looking at about 4.5%. And lots of people are thinking, OK, well, maybe interest rates, they'll start to fall away by the end of the year. Certainly, that's what the Bank of England had intimated before now. So they've gone on to the standard variable rate, the sort of catch-all rate that the banks give you if you don't have a fixed or a tracker mortgage. For those people, they have seen thousands of pounds of additional costs piled upon them. And for people looking to fix now, again, they will be seeing their mortgage payments increase by hundreds of pounds a month. And although people are stress tested by the banks before they get these mortgages, there's a huge difference between on paper being able to afford an extra £800 every month and actually having to do it when, of course, cost of living pressures are also increasing.
Yes. OK, and I suppose that leads to more people selling their houses, possibly people are going into negative equity. We're talking about house prices going down possibly by as much as 15%, all linked to this.
Yeah, the housing market is seeing prices cool slightly after 3 months of increases. And people, if they can't afford to pay their mortgage, they may find that they have no other choice but to sell up. I think it's really important that we don't just focus on homeowners, though. You've also got to remember that there are a whole load of people out there who are renting. And for them, the people that they're renting from may also have a mortgage. The payments may be going up. So they're putting up rental prices. So it is something which is impacting absolutely everybody at the moment. Of course, the reason that these interest rate increases are happening is because the Bank of England has a target of 2% for inflation. We know how badly inflation impacts the money that we have in our wallet. It's currently at 10.1%. We don't want to see it stay there. So the bank raises interest rates to make borrowing more expensive in the hopes that people will borrow less, spend less, and give smaller pay rises.
Okay.
The big figure that people will be looking at when they get the next inflation number is core inflation. But at the moment, we're just waiting to see what the bank thinks is going to happen over the next few months.
OK, we'll wait for the news at midday. Danny, appreciate your take of things. Danny's head of financial analysis at AG Bell, broadcasting to us live from Huddersfield this morning. Thank you very much.
Staying with the same subject, we're looking now at how this further uptick could affect the hospitality industry. Our East Midlands reporter Will Hollis is at the Red Lion pub in Lincolnshire. Tough time for pubs.
Yes, it seems like it's been a tough time for pubs for the last couple of years. We had the pandemic, we've had high rates of inflation, and now once again today the interest rates are in the news. And I'm joined by Simon Farr. You're the business owner of the Red Lion here in Caythorpe. You're close to Grantham here in Lincolnshire. Just describe for me, how does this business make its money, and how are interest rates and high inflation affecting you right now?
Well, we try to make money. It's predominantly food-led. So we're not necessarily wet sales, we're more food sales. And it affects us really by increase in cost more than anything. And of course, the direct impact interest rates has on people's leisure spend.
What are the sort of things that stand out for you the most as being where you're having to make changes in the prices of your food?
Well, food prices across the board have gone up more than 10%. So people talk about 10%, but actually it's more than 10%. And a lot of that is basic product. So we have to directly pass that on to the consumer to maintain our margin.
And you said when people have got higher interest rates and that affects the price of their mortgages, that they've got maybe a little bit less money. Are you seeing that in the amount of footfall through your door or at this particular country pub where I suppose Sunday roasts are the big seller?
Yeah, we are. We're not necessarily overly impacted because we are rural Lincolnshire. Our demographic is quite strong. However, we do feel that people's spend when they are out is decreasing. So the spend per head is becoming less.
You were speaking a little bit about roast dinners. How have those prices changed, just to give people a bit of an idea of maybe how similar pubs are being affected with their prices?
Sure. Look, 2 years ago, it was probably $15.50 for a main course on Sunday. We're now talking $18.50 to maintain that margin. And that is increasing costs on the basic products, but also locally, because we stick to local, we supply local as much as we can. But those suppliers, their costs have gone up, so therefore my costs have gone up, so we have to pass that on.
Overall, when you see these headlines that the Bank of England is raising interest rates, what's your reaction? Because they say this needs to happen to bring down inflation, which right now is at 10.1%, food inflation at 19%. Is your reaction, it's a bit of pain, but hopefully it'll make things better in the long term, or is it even not pain at all?
Well, look, whatever you do, you've got to get up in the morning and be positive. So we've got to deal with it. There will be an impact if it goes up by 0.25% today. What's that? £30 per family, again, increase in their costs. So on average, I think. But we've got to remain positive. If you don't, then you start digging yourself into a big rut. And I think we just need to deal with it, pass it on, and ride the wave, really.
It's a lovely day. We've got summer. I noticed you've got a big beer garden out there, so that's probably going to be used quite a lot. But looking into the next year, as we get away from things like energy prices appear to be coming down, and we're going to be using less energy. But looking into the next year, and as we run towards a new winter in 6 months' time, how do you think the pub trade as a whole is going to fare as we go into this next part of, I suppose, recovery from the pandemic and the financial shocks?
I think if you look at it from a holistic point of view, those pubs that are predominantly driven by wet sales are probably going to suffer, or sorry, not suffer, but they're probably going to feel the pinch more than those that are food-led. So I think it's going to be a slightly rocky winter, if I'm honest, especially if those energy prices do increase again. They have come down, without a doubt. Mine's halved, but it's still not back to the levels that we were pre the crisis.
Of course, and it wasn't just the pandemic. We've had the Ukraine war. That's really affected those big inflation drivers like food as well as fuel. Now, you can see right now the pub is closed. It doesn't open until 12 o'clock, but we're here all day. And when customers come in, we'll be finding out about how those high interest rises are going to be affecting the people that come to pubs just like this one.
All right, good stuff, Will. Thank you very much indeed. Right, with the time at 8:17, let's bring you up to date with the rest of today's top stories. Adam Price has announced he's quitting as leader of Plaid Cymru. The decision comes just days after a review found that the Welsh Nationalist Party has a culture of harassment, bullying and misogyny. Government plans to remove thousands of EU laws from the UK statute book by the end of this year have now been altered. The Business Secretary, Kemi Badenoch, says potentially only 800 will now be revoked under the retained EU law bill instead of the proposed 4,000. Rail services run by the operator TransPennine Express are to be brought under government control following continuous cancellations, the Transport Secretary has announced. The train operator, which covers Northern England and into Scotland, saw 1 in 6 services cancelled in March. Do stay with us. Coming up, we'll be discussing what happened when the dad of a Man City star, Erling Haaland, was escorted from his seat after taunting Real Madrid fans. Paul Coit here with all the latest next.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 8:22. Still to come on today's programme.
Well, just looking ahead in 20 minutes' time or so, as a new report finds young people are copying violent behaviour they see online. We're talking about pornographic violent behaviour. We'll discuss how you can talk to your children about what they do see online, and do you believe that your kids are subject to all of this? You see, my problem is, Isabel, I look at this and I think, surely not. How does it demonstrate? I'm not saying it isn't there, but I'd be highly surprised if young people I knew were subjected to that.
Well, the Children's Commissioner has done surveys of kids, and girls are reporting being whipped, kicked, choked, having their hair pulled during, what should be very often their first ever sexual experiences. So it's a huge problem we should all take incredibly seriously.
Okay, then at 9:15, we're going to beat the man who's brought the Alps to Essex. What's he done?
He's built a ski chalet in his garden shed. Good man. But it doesn't have to be a ski chalet. I suppose we can broaden this out. What weird and wonderful things have you built down the end of your garden to bring a little magic to your sort of, your escape, a bit of escapism?
Yes, so it used to be just like the garden shed.
Yeah.
Now it can
Dog
be...
kennel.
Yeah, now it could be a sauna, it could be a snooker room.
Yeah.
It could be some...
cross-training exercise.
Yes, type
gymnasium,
place.
Whatever it is.
Yes,
We'd like to see your pictures to send
dungeon. Could be anything. But if we go on the basis that the kids are all watching those things, that's what you could be building.
Yeah. GB News at gbnews.uk, or you can tweet us at GB News.
Back pages, let's look at those. They stack up like this. He's a troublemaker. The Star says, cheeky Jack Grealish reckons Real Madrid have no chance of ruining Man City's treble dream even. All hands on deck, says the Sun. Arsenal fear being priced out of a deal to sign Declan Rice from West Ham. They're talking about 100 million quid so far. Who's going to cough that up for him? Jofra Shocker. Let's have a look at this one, revealing the power of cricketing franchises. England must ask the permissions of the IPL franchise in order to pick him for the national team. OK, let's find out more. Where are we going to begin? We've got Paul Coit. We welcome Paul back to the sports slot this week. Where do you want to begin?
We can begin. I think we should probably cover the other Champions League semi-final, because Manchester City and Real Madrid finally poised going into next week. The other one, see, the thing is, everybody's talking about the second one, thinking, so who's it going to be that's going to be runner-up to either Real Madrid or Manchester City? Because it's the two Milan sides, Inter against AC Milan, and Inter won 2-0. Neither, I mean, let's be honest, are that great. It was 2-0, but they're 4th and 5th in Serie A. So you would imagine that whoever wins out of Manchester City and Real Madrid should be able to beat either of them.
Yes.
But football's a funny old
so
game.
this comes back to City's best chance of winning the Champions League and emulating their City rivals, Manchester United. I mean, trying to come close to Manchester United's Champions League.
That's what they're trying to emulate. That's what they're going after.
OK. Alfie Haaland.
Yes.
Who's Erling Haaland's dad, right?
Yeah. Now, I think most of us that have been to football, we've seen situations where you've had opposing fans in maybe a home area, which is not often the best thing to do. I don't know whether you've ever done this. I've sat there and watched a game in an away area, and then it's like when your team scores, you're like, no, and you have to try and play it down. It's a really uncomfortable thing to do. Although Alfie, he didn't really have too much trouble with it. So he was at the game at the Bernabeu for the Real Madrid versus Man City game. There he is. There he is in the middle, and now he's waving because the thing is that's him in the middle there. That's Erling Haaland. He looks just like Erling Haaland, but with shorter hair. So there we are. He's already been told no celebrating because he's given it the big one there just after Kevin De Bruyne's. Look, I mean, really cupping the ears. I mean, there's some pretty good hospitality in there, so I think he's had a lovely time. He was accused of maybe throwing peanuts on some of the fans, which, by the way, I mean, he has vehemently denied. Absolutely denied throwing food at anybody. But, not very happy. So anyway, he was moved away, but he was having a lovely time. But Real Madrid fans not very happy about his behaviour.
Well,
you have to sit on your hands, Alf.
He's at home next time.
I think he can do whatever he
Europa Conference League, West Ham, they could go all the way to the final.
Yeah, they could. And, I mean, this is... A lot of people have been calling the Europa Conference League and saying, it's a Mickey Mouse Cup and it's not that important. As far as I'm concerned, and I really believe this, it's a European trophy. Back in the day, we had...
Too many games, but you're right.
It's a huge amount. But remember, there was the European Cup, there was the UEFA Cup, and we had the Cup Winners' Cup. And now this is the third European trophy.
Was this the does the Cup Winners' Cup still exist?
No, Cup Winners' Cup is gone. So there's only two European trophies. This has been brought in.
We used to have something called the Fairs Cup,
which I think was the UEFA Cup, because the UEFA Cup became that in 72.
Yeah.
So it's the third tier, and there's still a lot of games have got to be played. And for West Ham to do this, so they're playing AZ Alkmaar of the Netherlands tonight. It's their first game, is at the West Ham Stadium, at the London Stadium tonight. And should they get through, then it's either Fiorentina or Basel. So the home leg is first, but it's a great opportunity. They haven't won a trophy since the FA Cup in 1980, so you don't get a better chance than this. And I just don't think it's fair when people start knocking it and going, don't want to be in this trophy. Just playing in Europe, and it's really important.
Just quick and a last word for you.
Sure.
New manager at Watford.
Yeah, Watford. You know when they have, if you buy something and often they give you 30 days to try it out and you can send it back again. I think that's how Watford are with managers. It's their 11th manager now in as many years. And we've gone from Zola and Silva and Grazia and Pearson and Hodgson, and it goes on and on and on. And so now it's Valerian Ismail, who was at West Bromwich Albion. He's now taken over. So hopefully he can see through the rest of the day. You never know, he might even last a couple of months.
My friend, got to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed. Paul Coit with your sport.
Now, ahead of an expected hike in interest rates today, Labour are urging the Prime Minister to get his fingers out of his ears on the cost of living crisis.
Shadow Business Secretary Jonathan Reynolds joins us now. Jonathan, when you say, get your fingers out of your ears, what do you mean?
Yeah, good morning. Nice to be with you again today. Well, first of all, I think we all recognise it's very difficult for people right now. The cost of living is the big issue, and that's what we saw in the local elections last week. We've got both a short and a long-term plan. On the short term, we, as we've discussed before, want to use that windfall tax to freeze things like council tax, to bring people's energy bills down and reduce their outgoings. But the longer-term picture is we cannot have more years of this low-growth, high-tax, poor public service environment. And that, for us, are about turning this country around, having a proper industrial strategy, making Brexit work, attracting the kind of investment we're seeing the Biden administration do in the US, fixing business rates, sorting out the apprenticeship levy. All of these things, there's many things on the shelf that a government that wanted to respond to this could do, both to alleviate the cost of living on people, but also to make sure we're on a much better path for the longer term. And I'm hoping for a general election as soon as possible so we can put that case.
I'm just reading the press release that the Labour Party have issued today, trying to claim that the Prime Minister is personally responsible for the economic situation, specifically in relation to mortgages. I mean, that's a bit rich, isn't it? We all know it was all down to Liz Truss last September.
Well, I'm certainly not here to exempt Liz Truss from blame, because that kamikaze budget was, quite frankly, atrocious. And yes, the figures we've launched today show the cost of that, an average rise in interest payments of £3,000 a year for the 1 million households who've had to remortgage since that time. But Rishi Sunak has been an integral part of this government. He's been the Chancellor. He has set the conditions in the Conservative Party that actually, I think, allowed Liz Truss to become the leader. So I think he is responsible for that. I think it's right to hold him to account for that. And fundamentally, I do not see anything in his agenda that responds to this low growth, high tax, poor public services trilemma that we've had for the last 13 years.
I think if Rishi Sunak were to be sitting where I am, he would say it's a bit rich, though, to make me personally responsible for that. I think most people attribute, when you think about his sort of financial record, the furlough scheme, rescuing them during the middle of the economic crisis. And actually, he stepped in with his Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, and done well to try and solve the problems of the previous administration. And we've seen, haven't we, that the banks have now said yesterday or this week that they got it wrong, that the pound is rallying better against the dollar than they thought, and we're expected to see growth forecasts revised upwards by the end of the year as well.
Well, Rishi Sunak, first of all, generally never accepts very much accountability for anything, and then second of all, tends to tell us we've never had it so good, and I'm afraid it isn't true. Now, first of all, I don't think it is in any way acceptable for each successive Conservative Prime Minister to pretend they've had nothing to do with the government's record to date. He has been an integral part of this. On furlough, that was something we very much supported, but, you know, it wasn't him personally paying for that. It was the state. It was us as a country being able to stand behind people in the pandemic. The TUC played a major role in drawing up that scheme, and that was the right thing to do. But I think if you look at the position we're in after 13 years of Conservative government, where most people are asking, am I better off? Is anything working better? The answer to those questions is no and no. And if you know, we've talked on this programme before, the lowest business investment in the G7. What a disgraceful position for the UK to be in. A rate of economic growth which is actually lower than really any sustained period in our history. Productivity, which is the real driver of prosperity. How much are we turning out for every hour of work we put into the economy? Again, the worst in British history. This is not a good record. And if you just look around the world, look at what the Americans are doing. Look at the Canadians, the Australians, the Japanese. Look at the investment they're attracting into the jobs of the future. We are nowhere even on the pitch on this, and I just worry that if this continues, it'll get harder and harder to turn around not just living standards but public services too.
You know, on accountability and on records, according to a member of your own shadow cabinet, an issue that still comes up time and again in focus groups and in internal polling is whether or not they can trust Labour on the economy, not least thanks to Liam Byrne, who left that outgoing note in the Treasury saying there's no money left.
Look, I mean, first of all, I'd just say Labour leads the Conservative Party on who the public trust on the economy in the same way it leads on public services, on immigration. We don't take any of that for granted, but clearly if you saw the election results last week, the amount of people in this country who are turning back to Labour in every part of the country, from Middlesbrough to Medway, from Stoke to Dover, this is not an insignificant change in the Labour Party's fortunes, and I don't think we could have commanded that level of support unless we were willing to be frank and say, yes, we want to win back the trust of the British people. We are very disciplined and robust when it comes to spending commitments. We will only ever say where money should go. Once we'll say how it would be raised, such as, you know, expanding the NHS workforce by ending the non-dom rule or changing the tax regime of private schools to fund for breakfast clubs. We're disciplined around that, and I think if we continue in that, that is how you both get the credibility and hope you need to come from opposition to government.
Well, we could debate it for much longer, but I do need to get one more question into you about the illegal migration bill. It's on the front of a lot of the papers this morning, the row with the Archbishop of Canterbury. What's your own position on this? Because we know that Labour, Sir Keir Starmer, said they wouldn't repeal the Act, so presumably you're happy to do and push through with a bill that the Archbishop of Canterbury said is morally unacceptable.
Oh, no, we're not happy to push it through. I think the Archbishop of Canterbury is right in his analysis, both in the morality of the bill, but also in the fact that it won't work. And if you look at what we have put forward to tackle this problem, which is greater law enforcement, a special unit of the National Crime Agency to do it, an agreement with France on safe returns, fundamentally, rather than wasting money on the Rwanda scheme, spending it on processing the claims, which is the heart of this, is the fact the government processes a fraction of the claims it used to do just a few years ago, and certainly it did under the last Labour government. We have a completely different approach to this that would require legislation, and we'd replace the parts of this bill that we disagree with, which are much more positive, ethically and workable proposals to tackle this problem.
OK, we'll leave it at that. Thank you very much, Jonathan Reynolds, Shadow Business Secretary.
I always think Jonathan Reynolds looks very regal. he looks like, is it King Edward? There was a King Edward, wasn't there? Who was after Victoria, and he had a beard, and he looked like Jonathan. I think, you know,
he looks a bit like Prince Albert.
It could well do.
Yeah.
But I know he's up there in Stalybridge. He normally talks us from Stalybridge, where he is there. But, you know, really, he could be equally at home at Buckingham Palace. I would have thought that.
Oh, so much to get into. So little time in these interviews.
So little time. The time is, though, 36 minutes past 8, which means it's 24 minutes now to 9 o'clock.
Stay with us. We'll be discussing the latest from Prince Harry's legal battle with the Mirror newspaper publisher, going through the papers with Freddie Gray and Scarlett Maguire one last time.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things. We've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference. And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News. The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
Right, folks, that was a spicy one, wasn't it? With us four, plus a special guest.
Sometimes she has to stick her foot in it. Sometimes she has to say things as they are.
Sometimes I think we should keep the refugees and send the pensioners to Rwanda. Then we'd be in a much better state.
Well, Benjamin, that is...
The Saturday 5. Saturday nights from 8.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
some of us.
OK, we've now got the newspapers in front of us on this Thursday morning, and we've got Freddie Gray and we've got Scarlett Maguire with their take on things. Guys, welcome back. Scarlett, so Prince Harry is among a number of people who have brought this phone hacking case against the Daily Mirror group of newspapers in court. What are we learning?
Well, one of the things we're learning is how there are completely different stories. So The Guardian says that Piers Morgan was aware of the hacking, and in court, a couple of people said, "Oh yes, he told me this is how to hack a phone," and he was playing something to the Mirror when he was at the Mirror that he was playing a tape for the whole. We
should point out he strenuously denied that yesterday and in the past.
But it was.
But his name keeps coming up again and again and again and again.
It was said in court. The Daily Mail says, all the stories that Harry said were hacked actually came from other royal sources.
Right, OK.
Right. And that's what's so interesting, is they're completely different. And the Mail, which, I mean, frankly, has been running stories about Harry and Meghan, I mean, so that you are so bored of them, now barely touches it. And what they mentioned right at the end is, of course, the Mail is one of the papers that Harry's taking to court.
OK.
I was about to disagree that people are bored of Harry and Meghan's stories, but actually I think you might be right. Finally fallen off
I don't know
it.
if that's true. I think it's just like rubbernecking. You're sick of it, but you're like, oh, now what's he done?
Yeah. It's watching sort of terrible reality TV.
Yeah, or car crash.
Yeah.
But in a way, I mean, how many times did we have to be asked whether he was coming to the coronation or not? Nothing. It's not what he'd done. Nothing was happening, and yet every day the tabloids would speculate about.
But they must have a reason for it, Scarlett. It must
sell. Well, as Freddie knows, it's clickbait, isn't it?
It definitely drives traffic. That's definitely true. But I think, go back to the Mirror, I think that they are, this case in tandem with the case against the Daily Mail is going to be, if the Mirror have to settle, then what does that mean about the case coming up against the Daily Mail? It's going to get very, very dicey and very interesting. And there are free speech implications, I think.
Kemi Badenoch has said it was impossible to push ahead with government plans to scrap all European Union laws because Whitehall civil servants were intransigent.
Which the government denied this morning when we spoke to them.
Yes, well, this is sort of a government admission that the sort of great bonfire of EU legislation that was promised is not going to happen. And Kemi Badenoch's trying to sort of own it by saying we haven't done it, but it's because of Whitehall intransigence. I'm sure there's some truth in that. I think a lot of people will be thinking, well, you're the government, you need to get round Whitehall intransigence. But I thought it was also interesting that the Daily Telegraph on their front page, I don't have mine here, but it's just there, they had Penny Mordaunt, a picture of Penny Mordaunt and a splash story, the lead story about Kemi Badenoch, because they're going to be the two rivals when Rishi Sunak loses the next election.
Oh, there you go.
I make that bold prediction, yeah.
Right. I wonder how much the coronation helped Penny Mordaunt's chances then. Especially if Kemi Badenoch fails with this repealing of the votes, of the laws, then,
It was great for her. All the memes, a lot of people who didn't know who Penny Mordaunt was now know who she is.
I mean, I have to say the Labour people I speak to are in awe of Penny Mordaunt. They think she was completely and utterly brilliant.
Yeah, she's completely brilliant at that, but there's lots of other things that we saw with her leadership bid that she wasn't completely brilliant at. She's good at holding swords for 2 hours.
She's got good hair. Penny with the good hair.
I mean, I do think, to be fair, in her leadership bid, she was up against the Daily Mail and all the right-wing press that desperately wanted Liz Truss to be up against Sunak and beat him. They did not want Penny Mordaunt, right? So, I mean, actually, to be fair on her, we don't know whether she's any good or not at running the country.
She's been good at the dispatch box whenever she's been up, for whatever reason. She's been quite quick-witted and commanding.
She's a good public performer, definitely. She was good in some of the debates, too. But I think the key point about that story is that Rishi Sunak could never have held that sword.
No, not for a second, could he?
As Eamonn, you called him a diddy man, didn't you? A diddy man?
Sorry, he's what?
You called Rishi Sunak a diddy man.
Yes.
Yeah. He couldn't have held that sword.
I actually think that's so insulting. No. Of course he could.
Of course he couldn't. The sword was bigger than him.
It's so mean to small men.
I'm not sure I could have held the sword. I'd like to think I'm slightly stronger than Rishi Sunak, but only slightly.
Yes, but you're not a diddy man. You're not a little tiny body in a little tiny action man suit.
I reckon if we did a survey of some of the leaders of past and present, the majority of them are Diddy men. I think there's a correlation between... You see him next to Macron and Boris Johnson, they're all around the same height, which is below average. And you look at Napoleon, all these successful but small men.
It's like a coat hanger frame. There's nothing to him.
Well,
he might have been down the gym. I mean, he probably has got a gym in his house, actually, where he goes
he's small and perfectly formed. I mean, it doesn't take away from the fact I don't know what my colleagues protesting for. He's a little tiny man in little tiny suits with a little tiny personality. Well, okay. Who have I to be respectful to?
You can make comments about his policies, but I think his appearance is a bit much. Anyway, that's my own opinion. It doesn't matter what I think.
He wears very tiny suits. He's a very tiny person, and I'm quite... And if... what did Trump say to that woman yesterday? You're not a very nice person. Is that what he said?
You're a nasty person.
You're a nasty... You're a nasty person.
Are you saying that to me?
Yeah. There you are.
She's
attacking me. She's attacking me unworthy. I was minding my own business, and he brings up ditties at the other end, and I'm brought into it, and then you start attacking me.
Isabel is sticking up for small men, saying that they're not necessarily weak.
Isabel's a snob. She loves the idea of certain people in certain positions. She loves the idea of
you're being nasty. Let's stop talking about that. No, I just don't think someone's height is relevant in a debate about
politics. You were
politics.
asking, could he hold a 2-foot-tall sword? How could he hold something that was taller than he was?
Stop it.
Well, is Penny Mordaunt that tall?
I don't understand where you find that.
No, she's strong. She's strong.
No, I know she's clearly strong, but I just think this thing about this height ratio doesn't make sense. I mean, Penny Mordaunt is clearly incredibly strong, even if she's not very tall. I mean, she's not a particularly tall woman.
She's quite tall.
Right.
It's quite impressive we got from this from EU law legislation. EU scrapping of...
Which I wanted to say, thank goodness they're not just going to do a bonfire of all of them, because actually, up to now, when they do scrap an EU law, they don't bring it back any better. I mean, it's not a freedom, it's just getting rid of it.
Sarah Dines, was that her name this morning? She's a junior minister speaking to us this morning, mainly about domestic abuse.
Parliamentary secretary.
Yeah. She was saying that the reason was they want to do it properly, and they don't want to set a deadline, and they'll do it slowly, and blah, blah, blah.
Well, if Kemi Bad... I mean, clearly, they just can't get it through. I mean, there's no question it's not going to get through. There's a very short time to go before this parliamentary session. By the time you go to the Lords, who are going to say this is completely mad. This is not how you legislate, by saying we will get rid of thousands of laws. It's just crazy. It was always mad.
Now, there's a lot of parents who can't get rid of their children.
Yeah.
Right? More than half of those aged 24 or under in England and Wales still live at home.
Yeah, well, I mean, we know why. It's because they can't afford to leave. And I've had both my children. In fact, my much older son is back using his mother's house as a base. He's not there at the moment. And I mean, I think it's really, really tough. And it's really, I mean, the children feel that it's really tough for them. I remember my daughter coming back from Australia and feeling that living with me was pretty awful. Nothing compared to what I had to put up with is that I'd had a house and suddenly I have this bad-tempered daughter who doesn't want to be there. So I think it's really tough, and it's about that young people can't afford rents and they can't buy their own houses, and I don't know how anybody affords it in London.
Yeah. And I do think when you are, as a young person, adult, you've got a job, you've got your own life, still living at home, you get relegated to that role of child again still. And I still find when I go home, age 40, I'm still spoken to like a child because they're still my parents. So if you're actually living there, I can see that must just be horrendous.
It was the worst day of my mother's life when I left. When I left home and bought a flat. It was the worst day. Honestly, she only died last year and she kept saying, I don't understand why you ever moved out. I was 24.
Right.
At the
That's
time.
so sweet.
My current wife says to me, if I'd have known you then and I'd have known you lived at home, I wouldn't have married you. If you were still living at home at 24, I wouldn't have dated you.
But I think now it happens massively, absolutely massively, no choice at all.
Well, I think that the Halifax deposit-free mortgage scheme is quite a good
Game changer.
Could be quite important for young people who really want to.
I think it is. I mean, and it does mean that you don't have to have your parents giving you the deposit. What worries me is, I mean, you still have to be on quite a good salary, don't you? I mean, whether you can buy a flat in London is another matter. And I warn you, Freddie and Isabel, You will not get rid of your children. And it sounds nice at the moment.
It sounds nice at the moment, but when they're moody and old, then maybe not so much. We have to say goodbye to Scarlett Maguire. Freddie Gray, always a pleasure. Thank you very much indeed.
Now, a new report has found that children are copying behaviour that they see in porn films online.
Some children have been subjected to sexual degradation at the hands of other youngsters, including strangulation, slapping, kicking, whipping and punching.
Now, you say all of this is sorted out by the Children's Commissioner. These are studies that they can back up. We're going to talk now with Dr. Paula Hall. Dr. Hall is an addiction therapist at the Laurel Centre, and the reason I was just clarifying that with Isabel is, Dr. Hall, I think a lot of people who don't have experience of this would just find this so hard to believe. But what credibility do you give it?
Unfortunately, we are hearing more and more about this. And frankly, I think the reason we're hearing more about it is because we're doing the research. I mean, we know that pornography is more accessible now to all of us, including young people, than it ever has been at any other time in history, of course, because of the smartphone. And at the moment, we just haven't caught up with technology in our ability to actually educate young people about the risks and, of course, try and prevent them from accessing the content. So I think we're going to get more and more research that is telling us startling and very worrying figures like this.
I think there's any truth in my hunch that there is a kind of reluctance to talk about this, partly because if you talk about anything to do with porn or sex, you don't want to be seen as the Mary Whitehouse, who's terribly, prudish, yeah. But equally probably because a lot of the people who adults are watching porn themselves and aren't prepared to acknowledge or accept that fact. And the reality is they don't really care about what that is doing to the next generation.
I think you're absolutely right. And I find it really challenging in the work that I do that so often it turns into a moral debate rather than a health debate, which is what it needs to be. But if you make the comparison to alcohol, many of us enjoy alcohol. Maybe we enjoy a little bit too much of it on some occasions. But we understand and we acknowledge that there are risks. There are risks of dependency and addiction. We know that. But we also know that there are risks associated with violence around alcohol, antisocial behaviour. There are many, many challenges. And we do whatever we can as a society to protect young people from accessing alcohol and educating them about the risks. And as a society, we've just got to catch up with that and doing those educational programs and those prevention strategies around pornography. And it's not a moral issue in terms of moralising about porn. It's about just acknowledging the potential risks.
Just final question and answer, Dr. Hall. We've got about a minute left. What is this generation of kids? What could they be missing out on? We don't want to be lecturing. We don't want to spoil the experience of romance. But can you tell us if they adopt what they are seeing in these blue movies, how that is detached from life?
You're showing your age there, Eamonn. Blue movies. I don't think I've heard that before.
There's so much more than blue movies.
X-movies.
I think that really is the challenge. Of course, there are some young people who see these images and just go, ugh, that's horrible, and that's it. But there are others who recognise that this isn't real life, and they have the other education, they have other support around them. But there's a minority that are at risk of having a major impact on their life. And one of those impacts, of course, is addiction, which is a field that I specialise in working. But other risks are actually not getting into relationships at all, and actually deciding that maybe pornography is an easier option than real relationships, or trying, as you say, to carry some of those activities into a partner's relationship, and not understanding why their partner may not enjoy it or want it in the same ways they saw it on screen, because it's not real life.
A bigger conversation of which we don't have time for, but thank you so much. So interesting listening to you. Thank you for explaining that to us this morning, Dr. Paula Hall.
Health issue, not a moral one, really does help get our head around all of that. We're going to have more on today's interest rate decision. It's predicted to rise to the highest level since 2008. But first, Annie Shuttleworth with your Thursday forecast.
Good morning. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update with me, Annie Shuttleworth from the Met Office. Now today, after a brighter start, we will see some showers breaking out and a risk of thunderstorms once again. The reason it's been quite so unsettled is because we've got low pressure that's bringing some quite unstable air across the UK throughout today, but things will start to settle down as we head into the weekend. So some sunshine first thing across central and southern areas of England, as well as central and western areas of Scotland. But by lunchtime, we will start to see some pretty heavy downpours breaking out. Another risk of thunderstorms, particularly across the eastern side of the country, where the rain could last for quite a while and lead to some quite large puddles and surface water flooding as well. Though in any sunshine away from the showers, particularly across western areas, it will feel warm, highs of 16 or 17 degrees later on. Then through this evening, things will turn much drier and we'll start to see our winds shift, and that's going to drag in some low cloud from the North Sea. So quite a misty and murky night to come tonight, particularly over any coastal areas and high ground, but temperatures again around average for the time of year by the time we get to tomorrow morning. So quite a misty start tomorrow, apart from across the far western areas where we'll see some sunshine from the get-go. The cloud will burn back through the afternoon. However, many eastern areas will stay quite cool and cloudy throughout much of the day. And so temperatures here will be slightly suppressed, closer to 11 or 12 degrees. However, in that sunshine, feeling more like 17 or 18 degrees. Now, that warm weather will become more widespread for Saturday as we see a good amount of sunshine across the country. But the next batch of rain will arrive from the west on Sunday. Have a lovely day.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The government hits back at the Archbishop of Canterbury after he branded the immigration bill morally unacceptable.
Very nice to see you. The time, 9:01. It's Thursday, the 11th of May, and you're tuned in to Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn and Isabel.
Here's what's leading the news this morning. The Immigration Minister has entered into a row with the Archbishop of Canterbury, saying his criticisms of the illegal migration bill fail to offer any alternative solutions. The government told us that people traffickers are the immoral ones.
To allow people such as traffickers to bring people, including children, across the channel, risking their lives for money. I mean, that's what it is, and that's where the immorality lies.
Interest rates are predicted to rise to the highest level since 2008 today in what will be the Bank of England's 12th consecutive rise. Inflation currently stands stubbornly at 10.1%.
Adam Price has quit as Plaid Cymru leader after a damning report found misogyny, bullying and harassment within the party.
Also today.
Just so you understand, ready? I never met this woman. I never saw this woman.
Well, Donald Trump making his first public appearance since a jury found him to have sexually abused the writer E. Jean Carroll. During the fiery back and forth, he also said he would accept the results of the next election only if he thought the result was fair.
And take a look at this. No, I don't mean the Fab Four pictured on your screens as we speak, but our brand new QR code, which means if you would like to vote for us in the Trick Awards, because we have all been nominated for the multi-channel news programme for our breakfast programme, you can do so with that lovely little QR code there.
That QR code, and I would say we would win easily if you, but we're not going to win because of you. Because if you wore that dress every day here on the programme.
Oh, what, you like the leather?
Think of the votes that would get us.
I might wear it tonight, actually.
For tonight, what
We're going out for dinner.
OK, that gets the votes in. You go on there, use that QR code, and you'll see all the other options there for Stephen and Ellie and other programmes.
Both the chaps have been nominated for Best News Presenter. Eamonn holds the title, so please don't forget to cast your vote early and often.
Thank you. So a number of ministers have clashed with the Archbishop of Canterbury overnight after he attacked the government's illegal migration bill yesterday as being morally unacceptable.
Justin Welby, who said the legislation had too many problems for one speech, warned that it would damage the UK's standing in the world.
Now, earlier, Parliamentary Under-Secretary Sarah Dines told us the people traffickers are the immoral ones.
Well, I do respect it very much, and the House of Lords is a really precious, important part of our constitution. However, with the greatest respect, I don't agree with what he said. I just don't think it is moral to allow people such as traffickers to bring people, including children, across the channel, risking their lives for money. I mean, that's what it is, and that's where the immorality lies.
Well, let's now cross to Downing Street. Our Deputy Political Editor, Tom Harwood, is there for us this morning. Tom, what have you got to say on this?
Yes, it was a very interesting debate in the House of Lords yesterday. The first time this chamber had been able to debate the illegal migration bill. Of course, it's passed the Commons, the democratically elected House, and it moves to the revising chamber, the House of Lords, where the Conservative Party only hold around 1/3 of the seats. And therein lies the problem. In order for it to pass the House of Lords, this bill needs the assent of people who aren't aligned with the government. moment, and that means that it is ripe for picking apart. And we saw that many different members of the House of Lords, particularly those from the Labour Party and indeed those within the clergy in the House of Lords, were advocating a path to change various elements of this bill. It must be said that a Liberal Democrat attempt to undo the bill in its entirety, to throw it out, was defeated, with the Labour Party responding to Lord Paddock from the Lib Dems, saying that it is not the place of the unelected House to completely throw out the bill, but they must change it instead. But this is all in the context of the government putting some pretty heavy pressure on the House of Lords, with an article written yesterday by the Home Secretary and the Justice Secretary. In that article, both cabinet ministers used the words "the will of the people," a pretty unambiguous reference to the fact that the elected House must have primacy here, and really putting pressure on the unelected House to not go beyond its mandate. However, those within the unelected House have been saying that they don't want to completely undo the bill, they want to change various elements of it. It was interesting listening to Archbishop Welby's speech, where he said he too wanted to stop the boats, to stop the people traffickers, but he thought that this bill was the wrong way to do it. This is clearly only the beginning rather than the end of a long road of what may become parliamentary ping-pong between these two chambers.
Thanks, Tom. Well, meanwhile, the Bank of England predicted to raise interest rates for the 12th time in a row today to their highest level in 14 years.
Yes, it comes to battle inflationary pressures, and experts believe the base rate will rise by around 0.25%, so it should be about 4.5% when they make that announcement at midday today.
Well, we're going to find out more about all of this and the effect of it. Paul Hawkins in Godalming in Surrey today with an estate agent to discuss the impact. I think, Paul, you're looking at house prices up or down.
Yeah, exactly. We're looking at the impact on the housing market, Eamonn, and not just about house prices, but also, don't forget, there is a knock-on effect for the lettings market as well. We can speak to Stuart, who's from Seymour's Estate Agents now. Stuart, thanks for speaking to us. Really appreciate it. First of all, what is let's start with sales and house prices that Eamonn was just talking about. Yes. What's been the effect of interest rate rises that you've seen in your business on the buying market?
We've certainly seen some effect, not a massive effect, since the product rates have started to come down, although today's interest rate rise may see demand sort of slightly drop off. But yeah, it's a mixed market out there.
Yeah, because people are coming. They come to see you, right? You show them around the house. They put in an offer. The offer's accepted. Then they've got to negotiate a mortgage, or they come to you with a mortgage offer already.
We ask all of our buyers to come to us with an agreement in principle or a mortgage in principle, which agrees the level of borrowing that they can, get, and then we can put that forward to the seller as being, a qualified buyer and in a position to proceed.
Yeah. So, but someone who's in the middle of that process now, and then an interest rate rise, they potentially they could pull out of the deal then, right?
They definitely could do. It definitely could cause a problem. It might be they have to go back to their mortgage advisor and look at alternative lenders with alternative rates in order to keep their purchase on track.
Yeah, and house prices, have they been, I keep reading that they're going to fall this year. What's your take on that?
Our take is that it's a level market, that they're probably unlikely to fall just simply because of higher demand. We've been through COVID, we've been through Brexit, people don't want to put their lives on hold. They want to get on with things and still want to move.
Yeah, and it's even trickier, isn't it, in the rental market at the moment, because there's a big problem with supply.
Massive problem with supply. We let a lot of properties here. There's huge amounts of demand. There's multiple people sort of chasing the same property. Often they're going for over the sort of suggested rental price in terms of a monthly basis. It's tough times.
Yeah, and difficult. You've got to keep having those conversations with the tenants of the properties you look after, and you've got to tell them that, sorry, rents are going up. It's difficult conversations.
It is a difficult conversation, although we do have some very sort of sensible landlords that just want quality tenants, that look after the properties rather than chasing every last penny. But there are other landlords, because of the interest rate rises on their buy-to-let mortgages, that do need to push the monthly rents up.
Yeah. From your point of view, are you hoping to see an interest rate rise later, or...?
Definitely not, but...
You'd be voting against it if you were on the monetary policy committee.
We definitely would be, but, you know, it's something like the 12th sort of interest rate rise in a row that they're predicting. Here in Godalming, the market's in good shape, but time will tell.
Yeah, brilliant. Stuart, thanks for giving us that insight. Really appreciate it. Stuart from Seymour's Estate Agents here in Godalming in Surrey. And yeah, as we say, we're expecting that decision at midday today when the Monetary Policy Committee votes.
Yeah, you know what? Estate agents always say things are in good shape in their own patch. It's all part of the game, isn't it? They can't possibly say there's a shortage of supply and there's going to be, you know, everyone's going to be fighting over the same property. But I'm not always convinced. But anyway, Paul, thank you very much indeed for that.
Money talks, though. So if you're not always convinced, it's whether you give the asking price more than the asking price or less than the asking price, you know, that's it. But anyway, as long as you have a roof over your head, however you get it, we wish you luck with that. 9:10 is the time, and we're going to bring you up to date with the rest of today's news stories.
Adam Price has announced he's quitting as leader of Plaid Cymru. The decision comes just days after a review found that the Welsh Nationalist Party has a culture of harassment, bullying and misogyny.
Government plans to remove thousands of EU laws from the British statute book by the end of this year have now been altered. The Business Secretary, Kemi Badenoch, says potentially only 800 of the 4,000 will be revoked under the retained EU law bill instead of what they had initially proposed.
Rail services run by the operator TransPennine Express are to be brought under government control following continuous cancellations, the Transport Secretary has announced. The train operator, which covers Northern England and into Scotland, saw 1 in 6 services cancelled in March.
And former US President Donald Trump would not label the Russian leader Vladimir Putin as a war criminal. When pressed on the subject of Ukraine during a town hall event on CNN last night, Trump said he didn't think of the war in terms of winning or losing, but that he would end it in 24 hours. I hope he was asked how.
Now, To The Point is coming up at 9:30. Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner are standing by to tell us what's coming up on their programme this morning. Good morning to you. What have you got for us?
Good morning to you. Well, we've got the former Lib Dem leader Vince Cable is coming into the studio. He's going to be talking about the coalition.
That's right, the
with
possibility
Labour.
with Keir Starmer saying that he might do a deal with the Lib Dems. We're going to hear it from Vince Cable. We're also going to be talking about interest rates going up.
We're also going to get him on Rwanda too, because of course a Lib Dem peer tried to kill stone dead in Parliament yesterday. The whole stop the boats policy, not what the House of Lords should be doing. It's meant to be a revising chamber, not a destroying chamber.
And on that note, we're going to be discussing, of course, what Justin Welby said yesterday. I've had very strong opinions of it beforehand. I imagine they're even stronger this morning. Also, bad news about interest rates going up again. We're going to be thinking about what that might mean for people at home.
And the bonfire of the EU laws. Rishi Sunak promised 4,000 would be abolished by the end of the year. Try not so much a bonfire.
It's more like a fire pit in your back garden, really. So we're going to be talking about that.
Be lucky if there's 600 get rid of. And we're both talking to the Brexiteer peer, Lord Marland's coming in studio too.
It's fascinating. Breaking news that one of the aides who complained about Meghan Markle being a bully got a gong off Prince William yesterday.
Funny that.
It's funny you're talking about back gardens there, but Andrew, you strike me as a man who would not have a garden shed or would not be spending time in his garden shed. Am I right?
I certainly don't have a garden shed, Eamonn, and if I did, I would never set foot in it.
Well, it's the latest thing, mate. It's the latest thing. Apparently, you don't use them as garden sheds anymore. You don't use them to store step ladders, the Christmas tree, and tins of paint and things. Apparently, you renovate them and you make them into a sort of fantasy world. And we're going to speak to a man next who has turned his into a ski chalet. Yeah. Anyway, and it's in Essex. But anyway, watch after the break and we'll show you it all.
I I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel. Britain's news channel.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News. The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
Right, folks, that was a spicy one, wasn't it?
With us four, plus a special guest. Sometimes she has to stick her foot in it. Sometimes she has to say things as they are.
Sometimes I think we should keep the refugees and send the pensioners to Rwanda. Then we'd be in a much better state.
Well, Benjamin, that is...
The Saturday 5. Saturday nights from 8.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Do you have a garden shed?
Yes.
And what do you do in your garden shed?
I don't do anything but the Christmas trees in there and lights.
Pretty mainstream.
Pretty mainstream, yeah.
Well, our next guest felt unhappy with his mainstream garden shed and decided to upskill it. What's the word? Upcycle it. Put his DIY skills to turn it into a Scandi-style mini chalet.
Oh, £2,500 it cost him to do all of this.
Isn't a lot, considering what he's actually achieved there?
Well, yeah.
I'd
We'll
have
have to see the finished article. We'll see the finished article before we judge. Took him 4 months. Alex Dodman made a swanky new garden hangout, and he's going to tour us around it now. Alex, we're fascinated to know what you've ended up with.
Yeah, so I've turned my old dilapidated garden shed into I tried to do like a ski chalet vibe in here, because I kept seeing them online. So I thought that would fit really nice in Essex, a nice ski chalet, just what it needs.
Why? Is that because you haven't been able to go skiing this year, or you just want that kind of cosy winter alpine feeling all year round?
Well, at the top of the garden was I've got really high fir trees, And what I had here before, all the fur kept falling on top of it and it was making the roof leak. So I thought if I do like a A-frame style cabin, when the dead fur comes down, it will just slide off. And also, like the backdrop of it is just nice greenery. So I think it looks pretty smart, but...
Well, here, don't keep it all to yourself. Give us a go. You're going to give us a walk around. Let's see what you've got.
Okay, I'll give you a little walk around. It's not massive, but so I started off. Well, I've got a TV there. That's all hooked up to the internet. I ran the internet from down in the house. I've got a nice plant over here, and it's all like cladded with like log lap cladding, so it gives it a nice like ski chalet feel.
What is that?
Put some nice pictures on the wall. It's just like it's like log lap. It's treated timber. So I've got that on the outside and inside as well. Yeah, it's called log lap cladding, so it gives it that like
Is that
log
expensive?
effect.
Because it looks very high.
I mean, it is kind of expensive. Yeah, it's kind of. I really wanted to have that log lap feel, so it's kind of expensive, that stuff. But I think it's worth it.
Oh yeah.
And then I've got like some furniture and stuff over here. And I've got like a little heater up there and all the electrics and then the nice like A-frame thing going right up to the ceiling. But eventually I'm going to move the plant over here and I'm going to fit a little log burner over there as well.
Yeah, yeah. And tell me, Alex, do you need planning permission for that, or if you were to put a sauna in there in the future, or the log burner, or whatever it happens to be?
Well, you do need planning permission if you go. So the rules are, you can go. Your pitch can be 4 meters high, and if you're within 2 meters of the boundary line. So it's not quite 4 meters high. So actually, I don't need planning permission for this because I'm within 2 meters of the boundary line as well. So that is a controversial subject as well. I've got a lot of questions about that.
Okay, but can we get a look from the outside so we get an opinion of what it all looks like from there? Oh, look, right.
You've got all the decking and everything. We've painted it.
I like
from
your
the
window
outside.
frames. I like that.
Oh, I like the lights that you've bedecked it with.
Very nice. Very nice. Very, very nice.
Yeah. So I think it looks smart from the front. I've got some nice little like festoon lights around the front, so it all lights up nicely. Got a little chimney down there and a nice little rocking chair over there.
I believe you've got 2 kids. I bet they love it. Do they want to use it as a sort of Wendy house? And are you at risk of losing out to them?
Yeah, I mean, they do love it. I'm not sure who I built this for, whether it was for myself or them. As they get older, they can start coming up here and playing games or whatever up here, and it gives us a bit of peace and quiet. But for now, it's my like little man cave.
But, you know, on the subject of peace and quiet and man caves and whatever, there's a lot of concern about men's mental health, about them having retreats, somewhere to retire to, somewhere just to have as their own world, away from the pressures of life. Do you think there's a lot to be said for that?
I mean, if you work hard and stuff, it is nice to have somewhere to come up and chill out and get away from the world. So I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But I mean, building stuff's my hobby, so that's my escape. So I mean, I've built it, but the actual building it is my escape. But yeah, having somewhere to escape to is a good idea.
And just tell me, because I know you're an ambulance worker, and you know, hats off to you for what you do, and we applaud you for it. Times are tough in the NHS at the moment. I suppose you've never had greater need of a little bit of a retreat, a little bit of an escape.
Yeah, that is true. I mean, it's stressful for all the ambulance people out there. I mean, I'm not front line, so I probably don't get as much stress as the people out there on the front line, but mental health is definitely a concern for people on the front line in the NHS.
Yeah.
We're getting examples flooding in from around the country. First of all, let's see the first one we're going to look at here of people who've extended rights. So that's serious. That is from Beth, and she said, "This is what my husband had built, added on to our house. It's a barbecue right there."
Well, she says it's not very tidy. It looks great to me. She said there have been many happy family barbecues there.
Yeah, big pit. And this one's from Lisa.
Yeah, she says, my husband Mark built an 8-foot-high sun deck in our garden last summer. Oh, we do have a picture of that. 8 foot high. Wow. So that's to get a little bit of sunshine, like a canopy. I could get into all of this. But I wish I had a DIY husband.
I think for you, Alex, come Christmas, I mean, you've just got the beautiful little Santa cabin there, whatever it is. You could invite Santa to give out presents there or something, put a few Christmas lights out the front.
I think that is a good idea to try and make some money back that I've spent on building this. So I might give that a go, dress up as Santa and charge people to come in.
Look, whatever, it's beautiful, mate.
Lovely.
It's beautiful.
Well done, you.
Thanks for giving people ideas and people for sharing them with us as well as to what they can do in their little bit of space, whether it's a backyard, back garden, or whatever, what you can put in it. Alex Studman there at his Swiss ski chalet, which he constructed himself.
Right, that is it from Eamonn and me. We'll be back next week. In the meantime, we're handing over to Stephen and Ellie, who'll be back with you bright and early from 6 o'clock tomorrow.
But now,
bright-eyed and bushy-tailed.
Correct. Bev and Andrew, to the point. Have yourselves a good day.
How bushy-tailed are we this morning?
I don't think particularly bushy-tailed.
We're not particularly. We were just saying we've had quite a busy week.
Yes.
We're gonna raise our enthusiasm for the next 2.5 hours. We have got a busy programme.
We've got Sir Vince Cable, the former Lib Dem leader, in the studio. We're going to talk to him about Rwanda. We're also going to talk about coalition with Labour, because he says that's a distinct possibility.
Yeah, absolutely. And this bonfire of EU regulation, which, as we just said before, turned into more of a sort of garden pit fire. Why? We're going to be talking to Jonathan Marland, Lord Marland, about that. He was a keen Brexiteer.
Yeah, and also interest rates, I hate to tell you, they're going up again. We'll be getting the latest on that. That's going to be bad news if you've got a mortgage or a credit card debt. It's just not good news at all.
Really bad news. And we're going to be finding some top stories from the headlines, the rest of the headlines this morning, with Carol Malone and Stephen Pound. We've got a lot to get through. Don't go anywhere.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know,
All
Kate
sorts
Moss?
of rooms. Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends were like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.